Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 25 of the Big Boys Table podcast. I'm Sick, and I'm joined by Mesk. What's up?
Yes, sir. Sick. Holy shit. Wicked sick. Mate. And shit. And Kangs.
Yep. So, yeah. It's the 17th of April, and
It is. It's 1:40 a.m.
it's a fucking shit show is what it is, probably, but...
Yep, I literally just woke up.
Oh. Well, good morning.
Good morning. How are you this fine morning?
Well, I'm not working on Warcraft 3 right now, so...
Warcraft 3. That game. That is actually one of the worst games I've ever played. Especially Frothing Throne. Like, it, hands down, it is bad. It is real fucking bad. See, I had forgotten just how bad it was. Because the last time I played the single-player campaign was when it first came out. And that was when I was still running on a compact Presario 100 megahertz in Cyrix 2, the 128. That was then upgraded to 196 megabytes of RAM. It was a PowerPoint presentation. I could not get through most of the campaign without using cheats. So I knew it was bad. I knew the writing was bad, but I didn't know just how bad the gameplay was until recent times where I've been running an LP of it. It's bad.
Yep. And if you think that's bad, wait until your command card crashes for your custom tech tree. Did you know the essence of Blight ability is hard-coded to display and sometimes, but not consistently, cost 5 times of its mana that you set in the object editor? I know that now, and I really wish I didn't.
I do know that the AI likes to freeze the game, and I'm not really sure what the conditions are. I know that finding information on the internet is impossible, because as far as I know, only maybe like 2 or 3 people have ever gotten into Warcraft 3's AI at all. And one of them, or well, 2 of them were AI Andy and Zalamander for the AMAI project. I talked to Zalamander some years ago. Unfortunately, it wasn't about Warcraft 3, so I really didn't get... Well, it was a little bit about Warcraft 3, but it wasn't really about like how to actually do stuff. And I was just asking him, like, what does Warcraft 3 AI actually have issues with? And he laid it thick on me. And but unfortunately, today though that doesn't really help. I was trying to make a meme project for Warcraft 3, and I very quickly ran into the issue that AI would actually just freeze the game or crash to desktop at around the 3-minute mark. I had originally hypothesized it was due to them not having enough build space around their town halls. And I managed to fix it without even knowing how I fixed it, and then I had to revamp the terrain, and then it just came up again. So, that's... They have lots of space to build. It's still just freezing. So, I may just turn it into an epic cinematic project. And, that'll be in the future, though. It got canned pretty quickly once I started freezing. And I spent like 3 or 4 days trying to unfreeze it. Trying to fix the AI. And, even when it was functional, it was very... very bad. You made a post on some forum, and one of the guys that I think it was the first reply, was like, Warcraft 3's AI doesn't retreat unless you have it set. But then it also, the other guy was like, oh yeah, and then it also can time out. And I remember looking through the JAS before you posted this, and I was thinking that stuff looks like it just times out without it ever actually resetting the timer. And like, if you look at it, it never sets the sleep timer to 0 again. Like, if it finds a new target or gets into combat, it doesn't set that to 0. So I would guarantee that it will just, like, hard time out regardless of what's going on. I wanted to try removing that stuff entirely, and there was another command for, like, a much more simpler suicide command I wanted to try, but with the game just freezing nonstop, I couldn't actually test any of this stuff, so I kind of lost the will to live. But the AI also has a lot of issues where its units kind of just will sit there and not retaliate for whatever reason. I think because they're like set to a move command to the captain unit and won't retaliate. I noticed that a lot in the normal campaigns as well. I think like 70-80% of attack waves in that game I actually break because I find their leash point and they just spin around back and forth while I kill them.
Well, there's also the insane moments where like 3 or 4 enemy heroes just got frozen, sometimes inside your base, and got like killed by a single crit fiend. So that was just crazy. I don't know how that happens. There's something that
Yes.
I observed in my most recent stream where I had been attacked by an army of like 20 or 30 units, and the last one to die was actually one that never attacked anything, just sat there like as if it was issued a move order to one of my units, actually, and just refused to attack. But it was like it was following that unit. Like an ally had right clicked my unit or something. That was sort of the
Yep.
behavior. So,
That is what the captain units and their behavior seem to be. Is they are units. They may be invisible and treated with special privileges compared to other units in the game, but they are units, and you can watch when the captain unit's moving around. The attack wave will all be set to move to them, and it's particularly evident when your units are very small. Like in my project, they'll all be facing him, and as the cap unit passes through the wave, you can see them all pivoting to follow it. And I witnessed that a lot in my map, and it was very obvious. Like that's what's happening. They have set a move command to this unit, and it kind of reminded me of Brood War because Brood War did have some behavior like that. It was not nearly as rigid, but there was when they make attack wave formations, at least in melee. I don't know about in use map settings. I really have never tested that. But in melee, when they make formations, they tended to have like a primary unit. It wasn't really like a captain unit like in Warcraft 3, but it was a unit that they would try to hug all their stuff around. And it could lead to some really strange things, like the air units pushing it around, and like they would all like, especially like when there was like a lot of mutalisks, they would all kind of bunch into this one spot and then hug this one unit, and they would kind of push each other around. Especially if like the AI kind of like broke when it was forming the attack wave, you would just see this unit just get pushed all over the place, and then they would leash back to their point. And Warcraft 3 kind of does that. It sort of kind of does that, but Warcraft 3 is also very stupid. So Warcraft 3, you have to set like the way that at least with the JAS script that Bellathol posted earlier, you have to opt in units for the defense, which makes sense. But they will still opt in any other units that they possess, regardless if they're actually configured in the JAS. So I have them making Borons that are very, very slow, and all their defense includes the Borons, even though I never told them to include Borons in the defense. So their attack wave moves at the pace of Lard, or their defense wave, so of course they've got this huge territory to defend. It's like a big city, and all their defense waves are just inching around as ghetto goons throw bottles at their towers and destroy them.
yeah, well, I completely removed all non-standard supply and worker unit activity. Excuse me, activities like militia, for example, because without fail, the AI would like call some weird shit in its script that seems like it's for ghouls. Balathon and I actually looked at the JAS that was like, well, the thing is, half of the functions, at least half, are not defined at all. They're just natives, and we have no documentation, at least publicly available, for AI natives. So
Yeah.
basically, all of the commands, like a significant portion of the commands, are just undefined, undocumented stuff, calling stuff that nobody's reverse engineered and rewritten, either in JAS or somewhere else. And so we don't have anything that's like GPTP or any of these plugins that we can use for Brood War. So when we're making Warcraft 3 content, we have to basically suffer the consequences of just working with JAS, an incredibly slow thing, and not being able to add any new engine functionality by reverse engineering existing functions and hacking our own I guess subsidiary functions inside of those ones. Like we can't take additional calculations. The best case scenario is somebody's created some insane workaround trigger system for you that probably outmodes a
Yeah.
bunch of other trigger systems that you would need to include if you wanted to include a bunch of other things. Like just to make the equivalent of minerals, you have to display their resource text above them because they have to be trees. So that's the only way you can even like show how many resources are left. It's just ridiculous. Like you can't have like tiny selectable gold mines, for example. Like there's some weird reason why that's not allowed. Well, if you wanted them to be harvested like trees are or like minerals are, where it's like over time. But the long and short of it is the fact that you basically have no control over a lot of the game's functionalities, but of what you do have control over is the JAS code itself. You can change what of these undeclared functions, these natives, uh, what they call, basically, which ones they call, and in what order and whatever else. So there's a limited
That's
amount of
precisely what
functionality.
StarCraft 2 is, by the way. Like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 are almost identical, with the exception of how they've written the scripts, like the stock system in StarCraft 2, and the number of files. In Warcraft 3, you have to worry about common AI and then your main script, and I think that may be it. Oh, there may be like one or two others, maybe.
There are two other files that include some JAS functions, but some JAS
Yeah.
functions that you can use in triggers just crash the game in AI script, and it's not documented which ones do and which ones don't. So it's entirely trial and
Yeah.
error.
So StarCraft 2, imagine that, but multiply it by like 20.
Yeah. So
And you
there's
have
a
the disaster you've got.
yeah, there's a huge amount of like extra dependency files or whatever for that particular
Yeah.
game. There is no, as far as I can tell, any. There's nothing like the guards system from Brood War or the bullies from StarCraft 2 in Warcraft 3. You can tell it to set the
Um,
number of replacements of pre-placed units, but you can't tell it to create those in the middle of the game, which seems really strange, at least as far
yeah,
as I've seen.
I haven't looked into it. I did see some mentions of guards, but I'm pretty sure it's only pre-placed units.
Yeah. So there's not even a basic functionality like, defend this particular
I
base.
suppose it's possible if you spawn units with triggers that might treat it as a guard, but that would require testing.
Yeah. And, in True Blizzard spirit, we're not doing that. So the main issue that we found with this system that they're using for this defense, like worker defense thing that I mentioned, is basically they set a temp group. They have like a local variable in this JAS function, and this local variable gets the value of lumber workers, and then they clear the lumber gatherers. This is, I believe, just for peasants who get converted into militia and for ghouls.
Oh yeah, I noticed that. It was weird.
Yeah, and then it also it's detecting whether or not the defense captain is active, and if it is, then it does all of this calculation, unloads the lumber harvesters, and then redefines it later on, which it just seems like such a bizarre behavior. Like at the very least, there
It's a
probably should
hack, at
be
least.
some sort of flag or something that you can set so that they just won't use lumber harvesters, especially as undead. If you're gonna have an AI that like handles lumber, actually requires resources, but basically everything that is defined in this game's AI common AI file seems to be done with the understanding or the assumption that there's going to be a billion pre-placed units, that there's going to
Oh yeah,
be
and infinite money too.
infinite money, the no resource starvation, and at the very least, the way that it's like you described it as a state machine where it has its build table and it just goes from state to state.
Yep.
It's really is expecting to just occasionally, not consistently, rebuild some of its lost structures that you've pre-placed for it.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in there, at least in the campaign environment, for actually building new bases, expanding. Like there are some expansion functions that I believe are probably from Melee, but I have not been able to make consistent use of them yet. Like they seem to work
I've got the
sometimes,
AI editor to
but
work with expansions, but I haven't tried. I tried to translate that into um my JavaScript. Like I just copy pasted everything over that looked like it was for expansions, and it didn't work. And then I read that the AI editor related scripts actually have special permissions and special stuff that only works for them too. So yeah.
yeah, it's just a mess of like mutually exclusive things depending on which route you
And
go.
I mean, you're right about the not rebuilding structures, because in the campaign, uh a consistent way to break the AI is just to kill their altar. They will not reconstruct their altar, and then that breaks their AI completely. And it pretty
Well,
much
in
shows
most
the
of the
mission I can think of.
examples I've seen, they actually have definitions to rebuild their altars, so that sounds like you just bugged them out from a completely different standpoint. And
Well,
so it's even
apparently
worse than you
it works.
observed.
I was like, huh, I see them rebuilding stuff. Like they try to rebuild burrows and shit all the time, but I destroy their altar. They just don't rebuild the altar. It was weird. But I mean, this game's such a fucking disaster. They didn't want to make an RTS, and all the people working on it didn't like their job, and nobody kept control of them. So it's not really too surprising this is where we ended up.
Yeah, it's just another one of those examples where, like, you know, people didn't actually mind their artists, their technical artists or whatever, and everything else. So you get an issue with like even if they had a budget or whatever, it's more so them misusing it in this case. Like
Oh yeah.
nobody actually, no team leader was managing shit properly, keeping watch
Like
over what was
this
going
game
on.
is objectively one of the worst games that I have ever played. It is such a fucking disaster end to end. There was no quality control, no management, no nothing. Metzen was just allowed to shit all over everything. Not a single shred of the writing makes any fucking sense at any level of scrutiny. And there is so much fucking bad in it. Like designer Dave, like you could make a tally of how many things he says in his videos that are just flat out wrong and incorrect. Like how he claims that Diablo 1 is the first ARPG. The guy who made it didn't even think of it as an ARPG, and it wasn't an ARPG. And
Isn't it a
his
roguelike or
fucking
something?
culling mission that he had to get Morheim to help him out on, that Melgana is still broken as fuck on. Oh, and then how Dave is like, what makes a good map is references? Like, come fucking on. Like, this was not, surely not opinions that only Dave held within the company.
Yeah, well, he also was in charge of one StarCraft mission that wasn't actually a mission in the campaign, but was one of those missions they released on their website way after, like 2 years
Oh
after the game released,
no.
and it's just a micro mission in an installation. So,
Oh no.
yep.
Oh Jesus.
So, with that being said, Warcraft 3 has been an unmitigated disaster to experience, especially not just like playing it, but also working within it. I think we can both say that
Oh yeah.
relatively definitively.
I thought, hey, maybe with some new knowledge and better perspective, because I try to make Warcraft 3 projects since its release to like 2009. Maybe I can do something different with it. But no, the only thing I really did discover with Warcraft 3 that was actually surprising is that the standards for Hive Workshop seems to have actually descended quite a bit since then.
Yep.
It's that was surprising because I didn't think they could actually get any worse.
Well, I actually did want to circle back to the Hive Workshop thread that I made, where the guy who said the first response is a guy who's made two campaigns now, or maybe the second one's in production or something. But in his campaigns, it's just one another. At least what I've seen from them, it's just another hero romp, a move between a bunch of shit,
Oh, that's
and
always exciting.
point A to point B. I guess it's probably a little bit more in depth than your average A move romp, like more in depth than Blizzard stuff. But you've played
That's
that
not
already,
hard to
so
get.
yeah. He did, however, use a hacked up, slightly modified, or maybe significantly altered. I'm not sure which melee AI for the undead as like an organic timer for your mission, where they're like breaking down the walls or something. Although I think they're like paused at certain points. I don't really remember. Regardless of the quality or whatever, it seems like he has, worked on different kinds of AIs before. It's just really strange that somebody who has worked with AI, demonstrably so based on what we've seen from his projects, says, as far as I know, this is a direct quote, as far as I know, there is no such thing as a captain unit.
Yeah, that was really bizarre. That's like the core functionality of the entire game.
Captains are purely programming constructs. Like,
I mean, everything in the game is a programming construct.
that's what Balathal said when he was reading that. He couldn't believe that somebody actually wrote that. So that's just perplexing to me. I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe they have the ability to change the definition of which unit is the captain unit, but I actually haven't even seen that
It's an
demonstrated.
invisible unit.
Yeah.
It's some special AI only thing they spawn, and shit follows it around. Like you literally all you have to do to know there's a captain unit system. You never have to go on the internet or reverse engineer the game or look at the scripts. You literally just watch what their units are doing, and you can see them fucking following something around that's invisible. Like it's plain as day. And if you don't know that, you haven't paid attention to the game.
Yeah, I
That's
don't know.
that's literally the only reason why you can break so much in the fucking campaign as it is, because they are following something invisible with a leash distance on it, and that unit doesn't follow other units. It's its own thing. So that's why, when you're attacked by any attack wave that isn't a hero, because normally the captain unit will follow a hero, but most of the attacks in the campaign don't have heroes. So their captain unit doesn't follow fuck all, which means you literally can just train them away from wherever they are with one unit and it'll be a distance of about half a screen or a screen or so, and they will just run back and forth. And usually, what will happen is any units that didn't follow you will actually just completely shut down, and they will stop attacking anything, even when you go back into range.
We killed one scout tower. Go home.
Oh yeah, and that's very common as well, and that's something I don't think is actually possible to fix. I haven't seen any actual references to them resetting stuff, unless my one theory was that maybe those sleep ticks are actually running while they're in combat as well. That might cause them to run back home, but I don't know. I was never able to test it between all the freezing, which I don't ever recall actually having that problem when I did work with this in the past. Is the freezing that was not a thing. But the new version of Warcraft 3 is definitely fucked up a lot. Like, the F mod is just a broken piece of shit middleware that nobody should be using, and Blizzard's using. So of course I have lots of issues, like the game crashing to desktop between trying to load saves, and sounds playing across the entire game at maximum volume as if they're on the UI channel out of the blue.
Oh, that's not, dude.
Not being set.
You know, in the Melee game right now, you can get bugs where the channeled spells like Blizzard and Mana Drain and Life Drain just play forever until you restart the game.
Not Melee, in the campaign as well.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
the
like,
cinematic ending as well.
Yeah, it plays in your menus. It doesn't.
Like,
they don't even clear it.
A Blizzard sound from Jaina play through the entirety of the final mission and through Archimon's cinematic.
In the cinematic, yeah, I don't know why I'm surprised.
Yeah. I mean, all the cinematics had some background sound playing in it, but this one was particularly noteworthy. And like that kind of shit really should not be tolerated. Like, this should be something that's legally actionable because, well, you've patched something and made it fucked up for everybody.
You've actually retroactively lowered the value of the product that people paid for. That is pretty fucked up. I mean,
Blizzard should never have been allowed to publish this to begin with. Like, there's no way Vivendi or anyone should have allowed them to publish this as it is. It's an absolute fucking unmitigated disaster. This kind of shit should drop companies in an instant. This should be something that destroys all consumer trust and just results in, you know, all your company being dissolved and all the lead being barred from participating in the industry ever again because they've demonstrated they have no respect for consumers, no respect for producing products, and no capability of actually producing products. It's really insane.
Listen, like, the top players define Warcraft 3 as a fast-paced RTS, and neither of those two things are true, so... What do you think the fucking average user base of the game thinks?
Yeah, playing only Night Elves makes it a very fast-paced game.
They still haven't nerfed Keeper? It's been like 6 months! This unit can just fucking entangle your shit! It locks them down 75 fucking melee's wound wells. You just scrolls teleport. Have you guys played this game?
Like, you don't even need to play multiplayer to see that Night Elves are retarded and why they're one of the best races. Because Moonwells, the Wisps, going into the mine, other stuff like that, like, they're just, you know, the efficiency of archers and dryads and stuff like that, like, they're just the best. They've always been the best. It's really obvious. And... yeah. No surprise they turn out being the only competitively viable race.
Yeah, well, at least Undead can use one strategy. Anyways, Warcraft 3 is definitely a shit show, but at least I have had some success. It's just now I got 2 crashes, one from the AI and one from the fucking build convert, so I don't know what to do about that. That will be some fun debugging. It just really showed a lot just in the responses. Like, if you knew nothing else about Hive Workshop and you just knew that this forum was a place for custom content for an allegedly RTS game, and somebody made a post asking how to make units stop suiciding into towers where they don't even fight back, and how to get the AI to expand, like, okay, well, maybe that person's just not very knowledgeable. Maybe this is like their first time making content in the game. But then you look at the responses, and people are saying, I never really tried to understand how they work, and I'm the only one who's ever written an AI guide. Like, what the fuck? Like, really?
Yep.
Like,
I went through Google and DuckDuckGo searching for AI information when I first started running into these problems, there are lots of people who have written quote-unquote guides, which are literally just the tooltips from the fucking editor.
Yeah.
And this is the exact same problem we had with Mapster and StarCraft 2 as well, is when StarCraft 2 had come out, HKS had defined all the actual physical limitations of stuff within the game. And then somebody went and blanket edited the whole wiki, removing all the actual information and just put it in the editor definitions instead. And at that point, we said we were never going to touch SC2 Mapster ever again. Because they literally just didn't even fucking pay attention to what they were doing. Because nobody actually really gives a shit. Like, I don't know why anybody would even actually do that. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But that's the community. That's because Mapster
honestly,
is just like people who left Hive Workshop. Like, there is nobody else.
that might actually be useful because, you know, it might take you a while to load the editor. So in that time, you could boot up SC2 Mapster
Yeah.
and find that thread.
I mean, anybody sensible is not using the editor to make their fucking data anyways. They're doing it through XML. They'll make their own XML parser, because that is what Blizzard did. Blizzard did not use that editor to make their game. They had the terrain editor, which they grafted onto that, but all their data was done through XML. And they probably had a proprietary XML parser of some nature that they weren't licensed to release, a lot like FaceFX. So, you know, what I still don't get about StarCraft 2 is I have been sitting on this fucking updated art tools since 2016 that supports like 3ds Max 2016 and shit, that has the lens flares, because that's a new object, and physics support and stuff like that. I haven't really messed around with it that much, and they gave it to us freely when we were working on StarCrafts, and they still have not made that public yet.
Yeah, well, they're not allowed to legally, but if you ask about it on their Discord server,
why aren't they allowed to?
if you ask about the new art tools on this SC2 Mapster Discord server, not on the forum, I don't think, for some reason, but on their server, they ask you to delete your message and DM you the tools. That's what happened when I asked about it.
Huh. Well, someone on Mapster probably possesses it, but I mean Blizzard themselves.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why Blizzard hasn't actually released it. Presumably because it was an unauthorized release to begin with when you got it.
But why? like this kind of shit is what doesn't make any fucking sense.
It's probably just got some middleware.
They want to monetize other people's work. They have nothing to lose by denying people the tools they need to actually make better content, and then therefore hopefully accrue more sales. I can't see it being a legal thing, because unless their physics stuff is ripped off of, I mean, their Havoc, they used Havoc before and they probably ripped off of Havoc. So maybe there's like a bunch of middleware in there that they don't want to tell anybody about, seeing as all of Blizzard's games are based on third-party shit to begin with, and it's all like academic shit they stole and removed the credits from. But I don't know, maybe it's something like that they just don't want it. They realized, wait, we can't actually release this with this functionality in it or something like that. But I mean, if anybody wants them, I'll give them to you. Just message me.
I say there are people in the chat talking about SC2 Mapster and how with the Twitch integration. And Shox is saying that they sold, they made it impossible to log in without a Twitch account. They sold it.
Let me tell you about that, because I had an experience with that. So obviously, Mapster is owned by Curse, and Curse is a shitty company. And Curse was originally a website for distributing World of Warcraft add-ons. And you know what? Curse's website, it still does this job. It's ugly, but I go there when Battle for Ass came out and I was running my video for Valorant 2 and I needed to update stuff and things like that. So, you know, that gets this job done. But then they realized that they were getting all this money for advertisement revenue and they wanted to become big like Google. So they started buying up all these websites. But they don't actually want to interact with all these fucking websites. And Twitch integration, anytime you see a site with Twitch integration, it's time to turn 360 degrees and walk the fuck away. Because Twitch is a liberal platform. It's all about censorship. And yet at the same time, they promote the objectification of women. You'll notice that it's basically the new cam whore website. And if you ever say anything about it, you get banned. So you can't trust them by nature anyways. But on top of it, when they made this fucking switch on Mapster to their new fucking shit, I think internally people at Mapster hoped they could finally have power over their own website because nobody on Mapster ever had admin power. They had no power. They could not ban bots. Like, I talked to some extent with some of the administrators there when they were having problems with bots. I was like, why don't you just fucking ban them? Just do a fucking blanket IP ban. Just ban all of fucking China. But they can't do that because they don't have access to their own fucking admin panel. And that's the thing with this other one is they still can't do that. So there was no way for them to fix all, like, if you can't even ban bots from your forum, it's time to make a new website. Like, it's time to ditch this shit and make a new fucking website. Because Mapster was just this curse thing in an attempt to capitalize on StarCraft II being a new game. Nothing fucking came of it. Mapster has never been a functional site. And here's the story. They update to this new fucking website, and suddenly it doesn't work on any of my browsers anymore. I get fucking errors whenever I so much as try to change settings in my profile, or post a message, or post a private message. I would just get some fucking vague error. And I had white script and everything for the site on NoScript. I had whitelisted everything. uBlock Origin wasn't blocking anything. It just fucking didn't work on Pale Moon anymore. And that, like, Pale Moon is a Firefox derivative. They basically, like, at the time, that was like 80% of the internet. So the like 5 people they had that went to their website couldn't even use it anymore. And they can't do anything about it because it's Curse. And Curse updated and like, yeah, we're not going to change anything. Like, they made it that eye cancer fucking white. And everybody complained because it was eye cancer.
Yep.
And Curse was like, nope, this is just an automated change to all of our fucking subsidiaries so that we can police you better. And that's it. Napster was a stillborn piece of shit. And Curse did absolutely fucking nothing to try to encourage it to grow, to try to give the people who actually did give a shit about it the tools to make it a better place. There's just so much disrespect from that business. I'm very, very glad I did not accept their fucking, their partnership. They wanted to partner with me on YouTube. They were very, very adamant about it. And I said, fuck off. And I blocked so many of their fucking bots. Machinima as well, who I believe actually went bankrupt a while ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's an insane amount of shit going down with all of that. I think it might be all related to that Machinima stuff. But there's a huge number of YouTube, or YouTube affiliated MCMs who have just shat the bed recently. So,
well, YouTube is an unsustainable platform, anyways, because you're living off of ad revenue, which only like maybe 1% of people who use YouTube haven't blocked. And 2, you're getting cuts taken out of your money. And 3, you're on YouTube, which is a liberal platform known for censorship and shadow banning. And 4, you have to ride the waves. You have to have, like, this is why Blizzard and companies are still successful, is because they have this huge army of staff dedicated to following memes and shit. And they say, hey, we can make the money if we hit all these right bullet points. And then that's what the staff does. They don't make games. They make marketing products. And you have to do that if you want to be successful at YouTube. And I have been following Mountain Dew and other creators of gacha videos. And Mountain Dew has some hundreds of thousands of subs. And then there was another person I'm following that I talked to. She is what is called a virtual singer. And she has a couple 100,000 subs. And they all basically the same thing. You either sell your soul to follow those waves or you don't get big. So that's how it is. And like that's one of the main reasons why, like, when I started doing StarCraft 2 casting, originally I had hoped to become fairly big because I did at the time believe that because it was basically entirely untapped. Like, at the time there was only PewDiePie, and that was literally it, I guess. And maybe Total Biscuit, and then Day 9 switched. So there was really nobody making StarCraft 2 stuff at all when it first came out. There was a lot of people who wanted to, but nobody with my kind of experience, except I didn't really have a lot of experience. And the way that it ultimately came down to is I had to make a choice on what kind of videos I actually casted. I either had to follow the professional scene, which was very, very boring and obviously never got off the ground for StarCraft 2, and I just didn't find those videos interesting to watch, Or I could go through the replays and shit people were submitting to me and the stuff I was scouring off the internet, like off of Team Liquid's blogs and shit, which were way more funny because they were like FFAs and stuff like that and team games and all these very, very bizarre games that I had found. They were really funny, but that wasn't the mainstream appeal. So just by the nature of the games I was casting for the same game as other people meant that I did not get nearly as much exposure. And it's and now I know that YouTube has all this fucking like their algorithm has gotten so bad to the point where it's basically you have to be clickbait and you have to have all these specific words and shit in your video and it has to be a certain length and all this other crap. And it's no longer about producing content you find enjoyable. So if you're trying to make a living off of it, you are just either becoming a marketer or just you're fucking delusional.
Prozac, meth,
Prozac. The Prozac prophet.
the Prozac prophet.
I just can't get I can't get over the fact that anybody thought Metzen was a good writer. How does anybody delude themselves to that point?
He is the lore master.
I don't think he's ever written. He has never written a line of lore in his life. There is literally not a single thing in Warcraft III that is original.
Oh yeah? Well, I wrote some lore. I edited his StarCraft wiki page to be a bunch of swastikas. I am banned from that.
He probably is a white supremacist. He's probably a Trump voter. You guys should go egg his house.
Yeah, I heard from a reliable source who heard from a reliable source who heard from a verified Twitter user.
They had the blue check mark. They can be trusted.
Mm-hmm. So, besides Orange Prozac bad, I guess... actually, I wanted to talk about Metzen for a completely unrelated reason. He was around during Warcraft II, right?
Oh, I believe so. He made a lot of same-face art.
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
area. He was originally a concept artist.
Right.
And they realized they can make him a writer and not pay him a writer's wages. Because he could just bullshit stuff. So he took what was basically just a Warhammer Fantasy ripoff and turned it into complete cancer.
Yeah.
And somehow it stick. They must have had a real good laugh about that. The fact that people actually stuck to that and that they didn't get called out. Like, that has got to be one of the greatest heists in gaming history. Like, yeah, there's a lot of games that use like Geiger and Alien stuff, especially in Japan, that somehow skirted past copyright. But Warcraft and StarCraft are literally one-to-one carbon copies of all this fucking Western shit. And they never got called out on it. And judging by that Deviant art post that somebody linked to a while ago, with the artist talking about playing nice with Games Workshop by not having Cerberus?
Yeah.
It really seems like it's just very under the table hand holding, filleting each other. When Games Workshop most certainly has a very strong and probably like unlosable legal case for suing Blizzard and tanking them and getting a lot of their money. And I'm really absolutely astonished they haven't done that. So Blizzard is either paying them not to, which would of course lend some credibility to the desperation that they've gotten themselves into right now, where they're actually selling off games to GOG of all things, because they don't know how to make remastered versions of them. So now they're desperately trying to sell them off, trying to get as much money as they possibly can, because they're probably bleeding like crazy at this point.
Well, you know what I got to say about that?
You want to mention something about Metzen, though. What about him?
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that point because I was too busy looking at this link UED Russian man drinking vodka sent me about how apparently Blizzard has official guides saying you can run melee AI with melee specific opcodes in campaign environments. It just doesn't work, so I don't know why they have that written in here.
I'm looking for my Skype directory so I can post those art tools for Luciferus. I'm actually not really sure where it was.
Oh,
I think I might just have to pull them out of my my 3ds Mac directory, because HKS actually bought me a new computer. So the last thing I've been doing in the last couple of weeks has been getting my environment set back up and getting everything put together. So while a welcome change, it does put a lot of stuff behind schedule. So I don't actually remember where my files for Skype are because that's where I received this stuff from.
Yeah, well, what I will say about Warcraft 2 with relation to Metzen is that Warcraft 2's story, from what little I have experienced of it, seems like it's completely different from Warcraft 3's. Like, it's not really even attempting to be a story. It's just like, here's an excuse to go
Yeah.
fight some people. And, that's what, like, passed for a story back then. So, I don't know why it took such a quote-unquote cinematic epic route in Warcraft
Because Metzen
3.
got more power. That's basically what it is Metzen got more power. See, Metzen created this very, very shitty point-and-click adventure. I think it was called War of the Clans. I'm actually going to LP that at some point. I have it. And it was not well received. I actually think some people regard it to be politically incorrect. Some of the older art for Warcraft is, for example, promote rape. So that's probably some things that Blizzard would like to scrub under their history. But since Blizzard doesn't have any writers, they obviously decided just to give Metzen power over Warcraft 3. So the way that Warcraft 3's development has gone, judging by the end product and what designer Dave has said, is basically they had a team of interns, and Metzen gave them bullet points that their missions have to have. So imagine working under this drunken loser just telling you to put in all this asinine shit into your maps to fulfill his fucking elf masturbation fantasy. And this is what you ended up with. Because that is why Warcraft 3 is such an absolute disaster, because nobody in their entire fucking company communicated precisely what we have deduced by looking at the product, and precisely what Dave and others have said is nobody communicates, because that's how modern companies work, because they don't communicate. But now you have Metzen, who's on this huge fucking power trip because he's been given all this power. They have other writers listed, but I'm pretty sure all their writing interaction really was in regards to really specific departments. Dave does mention something about was it Pardo blowing up on the cinematics department several times or something?
Yeah, because they were drawing ants instead of
yeah.
Oh,
like
man.
that really when you have to have your leads blowing up on people because they're wasting company resources like that tells you a lot. Like that alone paints such a vivid picture about how disorganized, incomprehensible, and just lost these developers are. And what Bellathal is like, what Bellathal was telling me before is I had forgotten about this until he reminded me. But Warcraft 3 was never actually intended to be an RTS to begin with. It was going to be it was literally going to be War of the Clans, point and click adventure. But their staffing changed. They got people on who wanted to make an RTS. But now they had this big divide between people who wanted to make an RTS and people who didn't want to make an RTS. So not only did they fail to make Neverwinter Nights for jocks, they also failed to make an RTS. And they were using like this 1997 engine that nobody knew how it worked. I'm pretty sure it was like the Diablo 3 prototype engine or some other shit that they had just kicking around that they wanted to use out of stubbornness rather than just sticking to what works. And the end result was something that literally looks as bad as Bubsy 3D, performs worse, and has no redeeming values with its gameplay whatsoever. And Metzen's same face art extends to the 3D models. You may have noticed that basically like half the portraits look exactly the same. Like look at the Prophet and look at Archimonde. That is Metzen face. That is what that is.
Well, that's just a fan theory. Perhaps they are the same person.
With the direction that World of Warcraft took, I really wouldn't be too surprised.
Oh, yeah. So, one thing that they're apparently doing with this Reforged thing, because this is another conversation we might as well get into regarding.
Oh,
Warcraft
yeah, they're
3.
going to retroactively change the lore.
They are retroactively defining the areas as World of Warcraft zones. And the excuse or the reasoning behind this decision was because they wanted to make World of Warcraft players feel more at home when they go back to play Warcraft 3.
Yeah, so on one hand, I can actually understand why they're doing this. I noticed immediately when we started Frothing Throne When you're playing as Maiev and you go to the Sunken Ruins and she says, "We're at Suramar," and then you see the map for your position, you are nowhere near fucking Suramar, and Suramar was not under the sea. So there is like, oh yeah, and Razorfen Downs is also in a very wrong location. The whole Barrens map is fucked up as well. So if you go between Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft, it is entirely inconsistent. Like there is no consistency between those two whatsoever. Not just in the maps and stuff, but in characters and everything related. Now, going back and trying to change that in Warcraft 3, the fact that you feel like you even have to do that, like you've worked yourself into a position where you feel like that is necessary, that is
Yeah.
like how do you even get to this point? It's your own fucking game. How is it you have no
Hey man, Artanis doesn't even have fucking nerve cords in remastered.
What the fuck?
Bye.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah. Why would I lie about something like that?
How can holy shit.
They also put skulls on all of the UED portraits and shit for some reason.
Oh yeah, Blizzard and their fucking skulls. You guys should go look through World of Warcraft fucking armor sets on Wowhead. If it hasn't got skulls, it's got crystals, and usually it's got spikes too. They're fucking armor, man. But oh man, wow. But
There
yeah,
you go.
like
UED Commander supplied me with an image.
like I think that going back and changing stuff retroactively is really the wrong way to go. But they're at such a point right now where they have literally two unrelated games. Like World of Warcraft and Warcraft 3, they are not at all related to each other whatsoever.
Yeah, it's just like Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3.
They're just different names. Holy fuck! That looks horrible. Why is it so slimy?
Yeah, well, that's everything in this fucking game. I still want them to
Holy
publicate. Shit. I want them to tell me who made this shit, because it certainly wasn't any of their fucking artists, quote unquote.
That's
I want
how
to
bad
know,
their artists are.
Yeah, I know, but I also want to know what fucking like intermediary DeviantArt retard they grabbed for this.
Probably the same one who made the StarCraft 2 stuff, seeing as they probably didn't even pay him anything.
Oh yeah, he's supposed to be. He's like brown in the cutscene and in the original portrait, but he's blue here, so I don't know what's going on. They fucking whitewashed our boy. They whitewashed our nigga.
Him. They whitewashed him.
Shit.
How could you do that to a homie? That doesn't even look like Artanis.
No.
That doesn't even resemble him.
Oh no.
And that background just is some slanted fucking texture, so low resolution.
Yeah, don't look at it, man. Don't avert your gaze. And your other minorities. Oh, they added lens flares. Fuck!
Yeah, they've got lens flares. You notice everybody does that now. Everybody's got lens flares and eyes now.
Yeah, it's really fucking sick.
Like, Blizzard has been such a destructive influence to the industry. Like, yeah, they just produce bad games, but the fact that they were successful off of their previous titles and those bad games gained traction, that's really where things got super toxic. Because everybody saw that they could be successful doing this shit, and there is no creativity in the Western market at all. So people are literally just, holy fuck!
Yeah, that's Stukov, man.
Look at his fucking ears! It's literally the same color background as fucking Artanis.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I'm living a fucking simulation.
Yeah.
Wow. This is just fucking wow, man.
Yeah, fucking World of Warcraft. What were you saying about that game? Oh yeah, completely
Yeah,
different than everything
it was
else.
so like this shit's so destructive. Like, look at what Warcraft 3 did to the RTS industry. Like, Armies of Exegos and Conquest Frontiers are literally like the only fucking RTSs that really tried to be RTSs around that point. And I guess maybe generals, but like everything to come after tried to do the whole fucking hero thing. They tried to copy paste fucking Warcraft 3, even though Warcraft 3 didn't do heroes correctly at all. And holy shit. Wow. This fucking image is that's insane. They didn't just completely fuck. They changed his face. They changed his hat. They completely changed the clothing they're wearing. They completely changed their expressions.
Yeah, dude. They made him a man of
Man, what the
shit.
hell? It's fucking insanity. Remastered. Yeah, I'm sure Warcraft Reforged will be just as bad.
Yeah, so
I mean, it looks just as bad.
the other reason why I wanted to bring up Reforged is that I think since the whole BlizzCon fiasco, especially after the fucking Diablo stuff, there hasn't been a peep. They just said they promised it 2019, and it's we're about halfway through. We're a little under halfway through the year.
What they have done is introduce a lot of bugs into Warcraft 3 with their latest update. I only mention the stuff I've run into in my run, but apparently a lot of maps desync like crazy now.
Well, that's not to say anything of the fact that apparently you couldn't even open the editor for like an entire month.
Yeah. And there's been like no word about any of that shit. Like they've basically just fucked the entire game. They fucked everybody who was making shit.
Yeah.
You know, these purchases like they ran a fucking sharpening filter on them.
Well, you remember when we were first discussing Remastered's terrain and how they actually ran a blur filter over the original assets so that they could make it look less high detail or whatever.
Like, this is what I've said. This shit should be fucking legally actionable.
Yeah, it's false advertising.
It is literally false fucking advertising. This is literally what it is. In any other industry, if you did the shit that Blizzard did, you'd be getting fucking antitrust lawsuits and shit left and right. But since nobody holds this industry to any fucking standards, there is no governing law, there is no regulation, there's nothing. You get to the point where we have fucking loot boxes and shit. And then this massive amount of just engineered misinformation. I also like how much they changed the SCV, too. They made him even more stereotypically black. They made him even more racist.
Yeah, before he was just a dude.
Before he was just a dude who's black. Now he's literally Tyrone.
Yeah, look what they did.
Look
how they massacred my boy Ahmed.
Look how they changed the medic so much. They had to throw on this fucking blue shit on her. They've got this backlight going on. They changed her expression to be more edgy. In the first one, she's kind of like carefree to go with her sort of like bubbly dialogue. But now she's all ultra fucking serious.
Yeah, well, if you saw the animations for some of these, you would shit.
Oh,
Kerrigan has an animation, normal Kerrigan, not infested Kerrigan.
The High Templar!
Yeah.
They added lens flares to him. There's a blue fucking fire in front of his head. Holy shit. The Archon's a disaster.
I hope somebody in the chat can bring up the...
Dark Archon has a fucking hoodie?
Yeah. That's Tyrone, man.
Holy shit.
Wait, who's that cop that shot that kid in a hoodie? This is like years and years ago. It was a big story in America.
Remember.
Well, that's him. He became a Dark Archon, dude.
He really did. This is such a train wreck. Like, they didn't even fucking reference the original art for half of these. And when they did, they couldn't figure out how to make it not Warcraft. Like, this is fucking Warcraft art. This looks nothing like the fucking originals.
Yeah. Well, the action pose for Kerrigan really still destroys me because she like doesn't have anything like it. She like has an animation in the original where she slowly brings her gun up and cocks it and then puts it back down. And in the remaster version, she just goes wide swing and then zooms into her scope, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, it looks so out of place and doesn't even seem to play at the same frame rate as the rest of the fucking
Well, they
version.
don't play at the same frame rate. You could see that even their fucking promotional videos when they first showed it on their website. If you looked at the Archon animations, they were all at completely different frame rates. Like they never actually physically referenced the source art. They didn't know how it worked. They'd never played the game before. They just had random rejects make fucking cargo cult copies of it at best.
Yeah, I forgot the Overlord StarCraft 2 portrait licks the screen. Oh boy. Well, whatever you do, just stay away from the screens, man. They might get licked. They might get licked so that they're as slimy as Artanis.
Bell has, without agreement from those ISPs which pay for network access, begun bandwidth throttling across this entire network. Yep, Canada is a real brilliant place.
Congratulations.
We were trying to figure out why I can't get high speeds off of Sweden over a fiber connection. It turns out it's because Canada throttles everything. Because Canada.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that that's a surprise at this point, unfortunately.
It isn't. Our bill keeps going up too, by the way.
Oh, of course.
I think I'm paying close to like $130 or something a month for this shit. This is why I've got no fucking money.
Yeah, and didn't you have like a bad sector in your net or something? I forget a bad node.
Yeah, node. Yeah, we have a node that will drop a lot of packets and randomly go down and shit. It was a pretty big deal a couple of years ago because it would go down like every second or third day, and it would be down for like half the day, and like half the internet just wouldn't work. Yeah, nowadays, I just lose service entirely at random for no apparent reason. Oh, yeah, we still have bandwidth caps by the way. There's a lot of Americans who are surprised to hear that, but in Canada, we do have bandwidth caps. So I'm paying close to $130 for a 400 gigabyte cap.
Yeah, it's CAD too, though. So that's like probably 80 or 90 here.
Yeah.
That's still a lot of fucking money to be paying monthly for something where you're capped. Like they tried to do that in here.
I know in Mexico you can pay half of what I'm paying and get something that's like literally like 10 times as fast.
Yeah. There's actually a surprising amount of countries that you wouldn't think would be on your first like stop on your world tour if you could go on such a tour that have much better internet than North America in general. Oh yeah, I guess Luciferius is saying that he's paying to uncap his net. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with that kind of stuff. I'm really surprised that people didn't push back harder on that. But they also didn't push back very hard on net neutrality.
Most people in Canada don't even know what the internet is. So
yeah, they just think that's where they get their Amazon from.
Like, well, most people don't even own computers. But the thing is that this is a country where they have cyberbullying laws, and the prime cuck is saying shit like people kind instead of mankind. Like, this country is so out of control. And one of the large reasons is because 90% of the people don't even speak English. Those people don't own digital objects. Like, they don't understand the gravity of how much they're being fucked.
Name the bully.
Bully hunters.
Can they hunt Blizzard? Blizzard hunters? That should be a faction of my. Oh yeah, what factions were you planning on including in your project?
Let's see the factions. Okay, so you were playing as the Mongols.
Fuck yeah. They're also in mine.
You are fighting the dogs, which were of course a unification of China and Korea. So they had dogs and of course exchange students and stuff like that.
Right.
There was also the Weebs. There was the Progressivists, which are like a doomsday cult. There was the Doom Bugs, the Void aliens that come out of their assholes when they get butthurt enough. So basically, a lot of the plot for that revolves around the fact that progressives basically, like, all this stuff is memes, but it's basically all based on real life stuff. So progressives exist for the sole purpose of getting butthurt. Liberals only exist to get angry and to get salty. And the general theme is that once a liberal gets salty enough, their asshole becomes a dimensional gateway to hell, and all kinds of monstrosities spew out. So, but they're also very, very terrified of women. They're basically all incels. So, uh, basically, you fight the progressives, the liberals, you fight the dogs, you fight the doomsday void demons. There was going to be a furry faction. There was going to be a couple of other special factions. A demon faction for the final fight, and I think there was a couple others. I don't really remember. It really like depended on where I was gonna go. I thought I was gonna have like 12 missions total, but then I put things together and I thought, no, 12 missions of because basically I wanted you fighting a unique opponent every single map. I didn't want to have too many maps, and I wanted each map to really stand out. So I thought, well, making 12 entirely new opponent races is going to be difficult. So I was probably going to cut that down. So I wasn't really sure beyond that.
Well,
But
especially if you have more than one set of races per mission or whatever.
yeah, because most of them were like 2v2, 2v4, or something like
Right,
that.
right.
So there was also the Freemasons as well. So the reptiloids that summoned ancient alien technology and stuff like that. They were also going to be a faction. And there might have been Russians as well. If I could find the assets for them, there might have been Russians. And possibly, I think there was one or two others I'm forgetting. Yeah, I'm forgetting it. Oh yeah, maybe the LARPers, the European LARPers as well, but they were mostly gonna be started off at the existing humans, so they wouldn't have been too hard to make.
Makes sense. Yeah, we have a lot of similar ones. How are you solving for assets generally when you have that 2-hour video you still have to release of you screaming at Hive Workshop?
Well, I downloaded a lot of stuff, and maybe about 3 or 4 of them made the cut out of that. And the cut meant that I had to edit them to finish them.
Of course.
So I was ultimately going to have to port and convert my own stuff. I was still really on the fence on how much I wanted to get into that because, like I said, I didn't really want to spend a lot of time on it, which is why I was really hesitant to try to really like spend weeks trying to debug this AI, and why I'm probably going to can the whole thing because I still want to get into StarCraft 2. I still want to make that project, and that alone is going to be a lot of work. And most of the assets I make for this, I can't cross convert, only for some of the main characters. And ultimately, I was going to have to install 3ds Max. I have to do that anyways, but I was going to have to do my own work. Like I was going to have to make everything myself. I was probably going to convert stuff from World of Warcraft and change it as I needed. I had to get a new importer to handle the current expansion for World of Warcraft. I think Taylor Mouse said he updated his, or not his, quote unquote, but one that he had taken over and was updating. But I haven't tried it. I couldn't get his StarCraft 2 stuff to work. That he had sent me a version that was unreleased and it was not behaving at all. And then he didn't respond to my inquiry about why it still wasn't behaving. So I don't know if he like died or something or what, but there's a lot of uncertainties that have me kind of nervous about getting back into StarCraft 2 because if I can't get that 3D pipeline working, I'm not going to bother at all. And then I'll just can the whole fucking idea. But that's basically what I needed to do for Warcraft 3, is I needed to port them. And I've done ports before, it's just the way I did it before was very long-winded. I think it took about 5 to 6 hours per model. And that is too much time, when in StarCraft 2 I can do a port in about 15 minutes. That includes making normal maps and everything for it. So it really came down to how much time did I want to put into this, how much time did I want to invest into it. And looking at the disaster that we had on Hive Workshop, there was basically nothing I could use. I did find some models that originated from Chinese and Koreans who were porting stuff from Fate games, and the animations for most of those are like random garbage data that somehow got exported as animations and weren't actual animations. Like they were really bad. There was a single person in the entire Warcraft 3 reservoir I had gone through who actually attempted to animate his meshes. Nobody else from Hive Workshop, nobody else from any of these other websites that hosted like XGM Guru or whatever that I had seen, nobody else actually attempted to animate anything. At best, they slapped their dick on the keyboard and called it an animation. Some of this stuff had people crediting themselves for animations where the person had very clearly never actually attempted to animate something in their entire life. Because you had like feet sinking through the ground and sliding around and all this other insanity. And most of the animations were entirely incomprehensible about what they were supposed to be. So I think you guys will enjoy that video because I think I lose my shit. I like to actually get physically ill looking at Hive Workshop shit because it's so fucking bad.
Well, look at what they're, basing their standards off of.
Yeah.
Speaking of standards. Well, I can't even. I was going to suggest forcing you to run through that campaign, but I can't do that to you.
No, I would never do that. I would never play a Hive Workshop campaign ever.
Well, no, you don't have to play it, but I think you'd die just watching.
I would never subject myself to that shit. I will fucking play a Diablo 3 again before I play something from Hive Workshop.
I do have to at some point run that anime campaign, Wanderers of Sorceria.
Oh yeah.
I asked Razorclaw what version of the game I should be running or whatever, and I think he said that the latest version should be fine, but he's still updating it, so I don't know when I should be playing that at some point.
Say what you will about Razorclaw X, he has been focused on updating and fixing and polishing his work over the last some odd years, and he's done it all on his own. So he's
had the help of random Japanese Russians that draw nude versions of his fucking characters, which is always psychotic when it gets linked in that fucking thread. And he's like, I don't mind lewd stuff, but don't send me nudes. Oh man, that whole thread is like a comedy goldmine if you got the fucking endurance. If you go to that campaign creations thread, you check it every now and again. Oh man, I can't wait to play that.
I've never had that happen because I haven't made any art, but I'm sure it happens for a lot of people who do stuff like that. And I guess the only real way to approach it is like the guy who made Nier Automata or one of the leads who is like, yeah, just zip it all up and send it to me. And now you have Blizzard. Oh, yeah, there's some weird stuff with Blizzard where like they were using Rule 34 as their marketing. They were like trying to say we're against all this porn.
Yeah.
Publicating it so that people will go to it and find it.
Literally every single person I talk to who's interested or played or plays currently Overwatch is always into it. Doesn't matter their gender either. It's really weird. I thought like the men would just be the ones, but it's everybody. It's everybody. Yeah. Everybody who's knows of that game, regardless of whether or not they like it. They've played it before. They play it now. They're all into that shit. And I don't know how the fuck it got out of control. How did we get here?
Blizzard made it that way. It was a marketing stunt. But now they're actually trying to cease and desist some people. They must have said something they didn't agree with. Like maybe they made like an okay hand or something.
Yeah, that was really funny. I still can't believe that happened. The whole okay hand controversy is, I guess it's like they've put it in the game before. Like it's actually a pose and an animation in their game.
Yeah.
So
remember.
Yeah, remember the porn mag as well.
The tracer pose.
Of course. Well, there was a porn mag with I think that exact pose on it or something related to it in like one of the bathrooms or something like that. Not the bathroom. There's like an outhouse that's a porta potty that's in one of the maps, and I guess there was a porn mag there that was like you just saw the centerfold or whatever, and they had to remove it in a patch at some point after the Tracer ass controversy.
Yeah, they like slightly changed the camera angle or something.
Yeah, or like just where she. Yeah, exactly. It's like where she was in the scene. I don't even think they moved it. Well, they probably don't even know how to reanimate it at that point. So fuck it. Why waste the work? And then they just come out occasionally.
Overwatch has
with,
even a single first-party asset in it.
Yeah, well, I still can't believe every time that company goes to shit, they turn another character gay or something.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how they just so transparently try to use that to deflect things? Like you had the Diablo Immortal thing, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, this character's gay. Look at how progressive we are." Like
Well, I
that,
think it was
like,
even after that they made Soldier 76 games, like very recently in the last 2
yeah,
months, and it was
that's what I mean.
continued
That's exactly
Fallout.
what I was
Yeah,
talking about. Like,
yeah,
it's literally they're trying to weaponize progressivism and liberalism, and they're just manipulating people. And these people fucking know they're being manipulated. Like, a lot of people are getting pissed off at Canada's Prime Cuck for the shit that he's doing, because he is literally just weaponizing them, because they're just a tiny little minority, but their screeching is so loud that you can use it to basically terrify people into submission. And Blizzard has been trying to do that for a really long time, but it is so fucking bland and transparent, where it's like, oh shit, we have a PR disaster. Let's say if someone's gay, we'll be held as progressive. And it works less and less every single time you do it. And what they're really doing is they're basically saying, we don't even think of these people as people. Like, they're literally
yeah.
like the most misogynistic, most hateful group you can imagine, where they're literally just taking somebody's identity and using it as a marketing arm.
Did you
And
say weaponized progressivism?
yeah, that's what it is. That's precisely what it is. That's
Homosexual stormtroopers.
yep. That is literally what they're doing. That is precisely what Overweight is. As it's just a platform for social control. And once more and more people realize that, it's
Okay,
gonna be hilarious.
wait. Blizzard vows to fix Overwatch bug that has shrunk May's waist.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
Oh my goodness.
Because people thought, oh, she's only big because she's in her fucking, super thick fucking winter coat, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Blizzard's like, no, she has to be fat. And then they probably fired whoever made that. Which is insanity, by the way. Like, that's insanity. The fat acceptance thing is probably like one of the most toxic movements of them all. Other than the HIV acceptance thing.
Oh yeah, that is. Have you seen Mr. Mediker's video about the fungus among us? It was very recent.
Is that the pausing?
No, it's very recent. He came out with it like a couple days ago.
Oh no, then I haven't. No,
Yeah,
I did see the one about pausing though. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Especially California and all those very, very degenerate places are just real fantastic places to live, where you may get assaulted by a bunch of gay men whose sole intent is to give you HIV.
What? I still can't believe that. All right, so I know what a pause hole is,
place.
but what the fuck is a neg hole? Can you explain that one to me?
You need to be more of a weeb to know what a true neg hole is. You need to know your kawaiis and your desus and your kemois.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It just sounded very gay. Whatever it is.
Gay. To be honest, folding steel is a pretty gay process.
Folding steel. Crossing swords.
Well, sword fighting is a euphemism. As is warm.
Warm?
Yeah. Apparently warm in Germany is a euphemism for gay.
What the fuck? Like...
That's what I've heard.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I still remember that story you told in one of those coffee hours where you were talking about how some guy gave you the cough.
Yes. I never knew that could be a thing until a gay guy told a story that, gay people apparently have a cough. And it is a cough that it's like a fishing call.
You know what? That's really funny to me because I just remembered that the reason why that OK Hand shit blew up is that people were saying that it was a dog whistle for white supremacists. Meanwhile, gay people have a fucking dog whistle. They actually have a bunch of fucking like a card carrying gay guy call. Like a little.
They also have pins.
Yes,
as well.
Safety.
You may remember that this exact same thing that happened with OK Hand also happened with pins.
Yeah.
And a lot of people started getting advances for wearing these pins.
Oh my goodness. I'm at a loss for words. Gays
America.
caused the Holocaust.
Damn gays and their richness. You know,
Well,
I never have had as much fun reading the internet as back when PCM and this gay guy were on the same forum, and PCM is like full fucking white wire. I say right wing, but he's like he's just loony. PCM, of course, being PC Master 84, an interesting gentleman, and I played quite a lot of League of Legends with him. He when you're with him, he's just an upstart American citizen, but when it comes to the internet and debating about the Bible and gays, he brings out his big guns. He brings out his pea shooter. And seeing those two go head to head over and over and over and over at Star Alliance was really fucking amazing. It was just incredible. And apparently he still does that on Facebook. I have heard legends that to this day he still crusades for religion on Facebook. Like a soccer mom or something. And every time I think about that, I I have to step back and I have to realize, wait, there's still actually religion out there. People still actually believe in religion. And that to me is so insane.
fuck yeah, dude.
I mean, I'm not even just talking about, fly a plane into a tower, get 72 virgins, goat religion by people who are brainwashed from infancy, but like in, countries who would consider themselves civilized, like Canada and America and stuff like that, people are religious. And it's so flabbergasting that people would put their faith in something that is just a Bronze Era cult to this day.
Yeah, well, mainly I think the issue is even without explicit religiosity, you still have the same sort of cultish behavior happening with
Well,
people
that's
who
what
are in
liberalism is.
progressivism. Yeah. So,
They're just a cult.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad. And it doesn't help that it has, like, it's so directly concatenated with actual industry that it's like
Yeah.
impossible, especially tech
Because people are so
industry.
scared to say anything about it. You'll find that the vast majority of people don't agree with this insanity.
Oh
But
yeah.
they're so scared to do anything because of all the fucking hive mind screeching that would come as a result that would cost them their job. So most people just stay silent. It's literally terrorism. It's domestic terrorism.
Huh? Oh, oh, never mind. Oh wait. All right, I had to sneeze. Well, all I can say is I think I've been paused.
You probably have been paused. You do live in America.
This disaster has struck. So, what we talked about StarCraft 2, we talked about Warcraft 3 being shit. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Reforged actually. Apparently people are really waiting for that. And by people I mean Hive Workshop account holders, so I don't know about that one, but they they want to go there. They want to
They've
hang.
got delusions, just like they've always had.
You know what's really funny is I read something about a site bug report or whatever about the search function on Hive Workshop, and people were saying like, "Man, I wish we had fixed this when you made this post months ago because Grubby tried to use it on stream twice this week and it didn't work for him." It's like that's the only reason why they have any incentive to fucking edit it and fix it, and it's still not fixed by the way.
Yeah, the search on that site, like that site is really badly done. Not as badly as Mapster, but it's a fucking train wreck. It's really like disgusting to say this, but I think that War 3 search was actually better in its web layout.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the main issues is like in any world with any amount of good in it, SC2 Mapster would never exist, and so you could say that Hive was the worst, but
Yeah.
because we don't live in a world with any good in it at all, SC2 Mapster does exist. So, what I will
It's
say
pretty
about
bad when the only excuse for people to be lazy is because other people are lazier.
oh yeah, like when it's not even their, well, they probably still wouldn't do a great job because they're working with fucking StarCraft 2 and posting about it. Ugh. But on top of that, they're like they're posing as Blizzard CMs and IRC.
Oh yeah, I love that chat. The fucking posers on IRC that claim they're Blizzard CMs.
Yeah, that was sick. They actually do have at least one person who, well, again, I don't know because of that history. For all I know, it could be, it could be a prank. But I'm pretty sure they have somebody who was an SC2 Mapster staff member who is now promoted to a CM because I saw him before he claimed to be a CM, and he has the Blizzard role on their Discord server or something. So,
Oh yeah, I remember that. And just like every other person who claimed to be a part of Blizzard, he accomplished absolutely nothing.
well, this guy is still there now. So yeah, you're right. Because if he accomplished something, it wouldn't have been with them.
They still have the cache bug, which someone who claimed to be a Blizzard staff member said they had fixed internally years ago. I mean, he very well could be a part of Blizzard staff because I would believe that they had fixed a bug that they had never actually pushed out because of all the other things Blizzard's done. But at the same time, it's pretty telling when Blizzard does have staff there that do absolutely nothing except try to brag about their identity, basically. Look at me, I'm from Blizzard. Respect me. Fuck you guys who actually want to do something with our game.
I still can't. Well, I can believe that they just outright banned modding, but the fact that people are still okay. You know what? You know what really bothers me about that? I don't even give a shit that they banned modding. Like I do, but it's also not
They
a game I
banned
work
modding?
with. Oh yeah, StarCraft 2. Well, you can't actually mod the game. It's like against their EULA, right? They, you know what I mean? Like you can't modify the game.
Oh yeah, when they removed like hot loading and all that shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can still do it. It's just you have a very low chance of actually being banned because Warden is so bad.
Right, but like technically, it or legally or whatever, it's banned. I don't give a shit about that. I'll cede that ground because it's not a game that I work with, and the community around it was already the wrong people from the get go because they advertised it with a fucking marketplace before it was out. So nobody in there was interested in making anything, anyways. But what really pisses me off is that they then came out with a feature called mods and a file extension called SC2 mod, and it's like you can't just ban something and then say you're supporting it officially. Like the amount of misinformation that causes is so insane when people are like, "I'm a StarCraft 2 modder." It's like, not if you're using the built-in editor to accomplish something. You aren't. Like that's by definition mapping. I don't know, man. That really pisses me off.
StarCraft 2 had mods way back in beta, but not anymore.
Legally, your custom content in StarCraft 2 can't be about any StarCraft 2 events or characters. What? How the fuck did they have all of those Rack to Cabinet contests if that's the case?
Because they don't enforce it. If you actually read through the legalese for the games, it's absolutely insane.
Oh yeah, that was another thing I was going to talk about related to Warcraft 3 is you guys who are still working on Warcraft 3, well, working is a strong word, but you guys are probably pretty lucky that the game is not on the Battle.net launcher right now because as soon as it moves there, you only own a license to the game. You don't own the game. I don't know how this works if you have a physical copy. Like, I don't know how they've gotten around the idea that people bought their games before this, like, they actually had this in the EULA, because you obviously used to just own the game as a product.
The thing about the end-user license agreements is a lot of them actually couldn't be enforced in court.
Yeah, I know, but I just don't understand, like, if legally you bought the game as on CD, and then you go to, download remastered or whatever, at that point you don't own the game anymore. You just own a copy. So you
own a license.
Yeah, and that's right. I meant not copy. You own a license to it, and so I don't understand why that.
I think that if anybody actually tried to evoke this in court, they would lose really badly.
Yeah.
And the whole wording for all end user license agreements would have to change. but I
Right.
don't think anybody has actually tried to evoke that yet.
Well, I think it's going to be coming pretty soon because they're fucking banning people if they type OK hand in Twitch chat. So, like, I don't understand how the fuck that's even feasible. But of course, Twitch is going to buddy up with them because of the whole Overwatch League fiasco. So,
Yeah.
I still can't believe Overwatch League is still going. It's so they really sold people down the fucking river with
They keep trying. Well, I mean, think of like Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3 had no real competitive scene in it, but they kept hosting tournaments for it because it was the only way to try to make money. And that went on for quite a long time, despite the fact it was always just Night Elf versus Night Elf. And it was always the same people. And, Overweight is much bigger than Warcraft 3, just by extent of Rule 34. So there's always going to be more exposure, and it costs them nothing to run it. So they're going to keep running it
yeah, but
down
they
to.
definitely have invested a huge amount of money into the league, like the professional league. They
Yeah.
made it back temporarily by the buy-ins. I just don't see how anybody has looked at the first season and thought, like, how have they sold these fucking people down the river? They must have just not watched it because it's not a product that anybody wants to watch.
Basically.
So, like, I don't understand. Like, if you just look at this, it's not long for this fucking world.
But Blizzard doesn't have any other competitive stuff to push. And they have to show that they care about esports because they tanked Kespa and everything else. So it's really the only esports presence they even have. So they're gonna cling on to it as long as they possibly can, especially since they just canned Blizzard Dota,
Blizzard Dota.
which really was the only game in their roster that had a chance of actually having a competitive scene. They just need to have a competent developer on it, but they couldn't find a competent developer because there was too much cock in their eye, I suppose.
I just don't understand how this world
All that
can
shit is just
exist.
so avoidable. All of this was so avoidable. All Blizzard just had to do was give a shit, and that was just too much for them.
Yeah, I don't know, man. What a disaster. What an obscene experience. Well, we've talked
Warcraft
a lot
3 is an
about.
obscene experience.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Warcraft 3, but we've sort of talked around the points I wanted to get at with Reforged, which was, again, people on Hive, working with working with this is basically like, well, I think you've described a part of your Dark Souls run way back when as running balls first into a spiked wall. So that's kind of like Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
What I really don't get is the number of people who are like, well, okay, so I guess it's a two-pronged issue, or probably three because three, but we'll talk about two. The first is nobody is actually making anything that is meant to stand the test of time in a way that wouldn't require repeated updates over and over again. Like, nobody wants to make a singular, stable project that's just going to work. Like, you run a campaign and it works the same as when you ran it before because it only works on one version of the game or whatever. And, you don't need to update it. You don't need to patch it. You don't need to update this melee mod. Like, it's going to work. Maybe your mileage may vary if there's some random elements to the level design or the script design or something, but it's going to work. Maybe it depends on the map you run the mod on or something, but it's going to work depending on the patch. Nobody really wants to do that. They want to make something that either they'll continue to work on and update until they get tired of, or I guess in their wildest dreams they become the next Ice Frog or something, which is obviously never going to happen. But that's like the issue number one. And obviously, like a subset of that is the fact that nobody wants to make anything RTS related, anyways. But you don't even have to make something RTS related in Warcraft 3 to see where this kind of line of logic goes. And the second thing is, at this point, since Warcraft 3 Reforged has been announced, everybody is not designing with the idea that they should even be using all of the tools or most of the tools that they have access to right now, because they don't know what's going to be supported afterwards, and they don't know what other tools are going to outmode the ones that they have now, because they think, probably naively, but we'll wait and see, that Blizzard will actually be adding some serious support to the editor and overhauling a bunch of functions, which I would hazard a guess won't happen, but again, we'll just wait and see. So since people don't want to make anything that isn't going to require them to constantly patch it and update it and break older versions, and since they're not even using all of the functions that they have at their disposal right now because they are convinced that the availability of certain tools and techniques are going to change and we're going to get something better down the line, they're not really making anything that obviously is going to be a consistent experience anytime soon. And so nobody's really making anything releasable. So it's a kind of situation where the developer coming back and updating stuff, at least right now, is like a very destructive aspect to the game. And if it's anything like remastered, the quote unquote community for custom content is going to get absolutely eviscerated. And most of the people who are serious about making anything are just going to remain on an older, stable version of the game where they can do whatever they need to do without fear of it breaking again. And I am going out on a limb and saying that they're probably not going to support version freezing out of the box natively, and no reverse engineer is going to be interested enough to develop that for Reforged. So if and when, more likely, Reforged does break everything that you like about Warcraft 3 in terms of engine functionality, or break something that's integral to your idea of a project, you are going to have to go back to the old game, and that is going to cost you a lot of motivation and time and man hours and manpower and all that. Man, so
Warcraft 3 has already seen the extent that its custom content community can develop for it. Warcraft 3, as far as Hive Workshop and similar sites were concerned, has seen the limit of what they're capable of making with it within like the first year of the game's release. There is nobody in that community that has any aspirations of making high quality projects. So they're just looking for easy excuses to keep being identified as people who make projects. And the issues with Warcraft 3 and Hive Workshop are sort of separate from each other. But there's already been a community evisceration by extent of the return bug being fixed because that broke a lot of old stuff. And in order to adapt to that, you have to do a lot of work. Most people aren't willing to do it. Most people have long abandoned their projects. So a lot of maps just flat out don't work anymore. If you try to host some old maps, you'll actually just be automatically banned from Battle.net for months at a time, if not permanently. And then their latest patches have fucked up stuff and caused maps like Castle Fight to just desync like crazy all over the place and constantly be dropping people. So that has divided everybody again. And if that hasn't convinced most of the casual mappers to jump ship, when Remastered comes out and it turns out that nothing is any different at all, that's going to be a thing, or it's going to be more locked down, just like StarCraft Remastered is. And but the thing about Hive Workshop and stuff like that is they never really were interested in making projects. So it's not really too far-fetched to say that they'll just take whatever Blizzard shits on them and treat it as, the Lamb of God. Because that's what they have done to this point. And I remember making a post on Team Liquid back when beta for StarCraft Wings of Liberty was out, and some people on Hive Workshop got very butthurt about that post because they thought StarCraft 2 was going to be successful and nobody could tell them otherwise. So, of course, nobody had a word to say when StarCraft 2 did come out, and there was nothing for that game at all. And most of those people just decided, oh, we're just going to stick with Warcraft 3 anyways. At least we have Warcraft 3, our shining beacon of user-friendliness and freedom to make shitty point-and-click adventures with. And I don't think Remastered is really going to change that for those kinds of people because they're already used to eating shit. They like the taste of shit. And if Blizzard just gives them shit with a little bit more iron shavings in it, they're going to happily eat it. But anybody else who was thinking of getting into the game and was sort of on the fence because Reforged is coming out and they think Reforged is going to open more options, I think they're all going to be switching to Unreal 4.
they'll be switching to a shotgun.
Yeah, because the thing is that if you're making a mod, you're already being really dishonest. You're being dishonest with yourself. You're saying, I don't want to try. Or you're being really lazy. And if you are somebody who has real drive to learn new skills and get involved with stuff and want to make something, you are going to either invest a lot of time into a mod and discover that you can't make what you want to make, and therefore end up with a shadow of what you wanted to make and be really disappointed with it, or you're going to end up canning it. And for most people, they can it. Like, I would say, 99 out of 100 people, they can it. That's been the experience I have seen with countless communities. And these are projects that get to the point where, visually speaking, contextually speaking, they're basically finished. And they get canned because they can't make something that they had originally envisioned. I saw it a lot with Sins of a Solar Empire. I've seen it a lot with Warcraft 3. I've seen it a lot with StarCraft 2. I've seen it a lot with StarCraft 1. 99 out of 100 projects never get finished, never get released. And the other people, the people who actually do give enough of a shit to say, well, it's an experience, I learned something, it's time to move on, they ditch it and go on to something else. and that will take you into Unreal 4, because Unreal 4 is basically the only engine out there that's worth doing anything with. And then they're going to realize that mod making, map making has nothing to do with game design whatsoever. Making an actual game is much more difficult and involves many more skills that you are never exposed to as a modder. And once again, 99 out of 100 of those people are going to drop immediately. So what gets those projects going at this point is generally cash incentives. If the people have a lot of money, they buy their way out. So this was the case with Oracle. Oracle was not a developer. He may have had some development exposure within StarCraft 1, but when it came to making his Legacy of the Confederation shit in StarCraft 2, he didn't want to make it. He did some experiments and kind of wanted to figure out what the game could do, but he didn't actually want to make it himself. So he threw $80,000, $90,000 at random artists he found on the internet who would take his commissions without any education whatsoever about what he actually needed for the game. So he handed me one of these assets and wanted me to tell him what he needed someone to do to get it into the game and functional. And I looked at this asset. This asset looked like something he had bought off a Turbo Squid. It was like a photorealistic textured hazmat suit guy. And there was no normal maps of any kind or anything of that nature. The face in it had more polygons than entire cinematic scenes in StarCraft 2. So I had to tell him, this is not a game asset. You can put it in the game, and I did put it in the game for him to show him how it's done. But you've got a lot of work to do, and there is no animations for this whatsoever. And you need normal maps and all this other shit. So then he goes silent for a while and is like, okay, well, I can just have you do it. And I'm like, I'm not an animator. I can port your stuff into the game, but I can't animate them. So the general gist is that he had me sign a non-disclosure agreement at that point.
What?
And was going to give me stuff to put in the game and pay me for it. It's effectively the same thing I did for StarCrafts.
Right.
And then I never heard from him ever again.
Oh, okay.
So he never got back to me. He never actually gave me any work to do. He never said a thing. This was not my first time encountering this with this person. I think it was actually maybe my third time, where he wanted me to do something, but didn't actually give me something to do. Yeah. The first two times had to do with voice acting years ago for the same project. So my general gist of the situation is that something happened internally with him where he realized that this actually takes more work than he's prepared to get involved with. He's like so many of these other idea people that they want to make something, and then they realize that it actually takes effort to make, and then they don't want to do it. And he's one of those people. He's willing to throw, I don't know what he works at or what he does, but he threw like tens of thousands of dollars at this and accomplished absolutely nothing with it. And then he posted some shit on Facebook, and then that died immediately. And all the stuff he posted on Facebook was really low quality and really bad. And everybody laughed at him. And then that was it. And then he never worked on it again. And that was years and 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 years ago. And he just silently lets it die and says nothing. And StarCraft was basically the same way, because none of these. The thing is, the heart of it is none of these people actually really give a shit. They always have some fucking ulterior motive for making these projects. For Carbot, it was fame and popularity. People paid him to make something and support it, and he had basically nothing to do with making it at all. And he didn't want to support it at all. Except he would later complain on Twitter about how he wished somebody would update it when he had the fucking people on speed dial that could update it for him, and then he didn't want to pay them for it. That's my gist of it anyways. And he just didn't really actually care. These people weren't involved. The thing is that if a leader is going to make a project, he has to actually lead. These people who pay for things and have people make things for them, they're not involved in the development of the project. They don't develop a bond with the energy and the time and the commitment it takes to actually build something. And most of these people end up that way because they have tried it in the past and they realized they're not cut out to be developers. That's ultimately what it amounts to. They're not cut out to be developers. They realize they don't have the energy to commit to anything. They realize they don't actually have the passion to do it. So that's why you go into Warcraft 3 and Hive Workshop and all these other places that produce these shitty fucking point and click adventures. Because you can piss out a campaign that's a point and click adventure in a couple weeks, easily. Especially if you're in Neat. You don't have to worry about gameplay design. You don't have to worry about AI design. You don't have to worry about graphics. You don't have to worry about sounds. All this shit that takes time to actually get into and learn and especially make consistent, they don't worry about any of this shit. Or they just try to find other people to do it for them because they don't want to get fucking involved. They don't actually want to sit down and make their project. They want somebody else to make it, and then they want to take credit for it. So what a lot of these people are hoping is that Warcraft Reforged will make that process easier, that it will enable them to be lazier. But the thing is let's say Warcraft Reforged adds normal maps. And this is the exact same thing I had to tell people with StarCraft 2 as well. One of the reasons why the size limitations in StarCraft 2 are absolutely fucking insane. When you add in these other channels to the textures, it is adding literally like double or triple the texture information you need to have just for the same resolution of assets. Like, so let's take StarCraft Remastered, for example. UED Commander wanted me to port a mothership for him, which I said I might or might not to get to. I might still attempt that in the late future. But that was like a really great example of the kind of information bloat that happens when you update these things to newer rendering systems. To get that sprite for him, for the mothership, I actually would have to learn a few things in 3ds Max I've never actually tried to do yet. Because I have to render out a whole bunch of fucking channels I normally never have to do. In StarCraft 1, you just have the sprite for an air unit. It's just a fucking, it's called a diffuse. That tells you your texture information and your lighting, and that's it. It's just painted textures. That's what Warcraft 3 uses. It's just diffuses. But now for StarCraft Remastered and everything else like it, like StarCraft 2, you also have normal maps. You have emissive maps. I think StarCraft Remastered uses ambient occlusion maps and some other
Dark
maps as
maps.
well. Yeah. So those maps are used for basically faking their lighting and other crap like that, and for their post-processing. And you have to render all this shit out. Like, you have to actually change how 3ds Max is rendering stuff, and you may have to actually do some scene configuration for it. I don't really know. I haven't really looked into it. But a lot of the older ways of doing it, you can't just render it out. You actually have to bake it. You actually have to have your full scene in 3ds Max, which is a problem if you're porting something or kit bashing something because you don't have all this stuff in the scene configured already. You have to set up your textures and stuff in a really specific way to be able to bake them without artifacting. And if you don't have it set up like that, then you can't do that. So it can be quite a train wreck. And that's a huge workload increase from just, slapping together a diffuse map or rendering something as a diffuse. The workload is completely different. You need a whole new set of skills. Making a normal map is typically what you do is when you make your model, you have a high poly version, and then you make a low poly version from that, and you use the high poly to bake normals out of for the low poly version. So that entire process is an entirely different dimension from Warcraft 3. Because Warcraft 3, you just make a model, right? You just make a model, you make sure it performs well, you make sure it's functionally complete, it has collision, all this other simple shit. You can slap that together in like 15, 20 minutes. StarCraft 2, if you want to make a good asset, you're going to need to have to make good source content, which means you need to be making the high poly baking to the low poly. You need to have access to all these different tools to do that. You can't just do that in 3ds Max. Unless you really want to spend a really long time. You're usually using a sculpting program. I tried to get into that. I couldn't understand how the fucking interface for those programs work. They were terrible. And then you do have tools available like Substance Designer and Substance Painter that make your job of doing UV maps and putting textures on them a lot more simple. But that's still 2 new tools you need to learn. And those tools are like, they're more advanced than Photoshop. They're more advanced than 3ds Max in many ways. Like, to actually expose the full power of those tools, you basically need to go to classes and spend years with them. So to make good content for these games that isn't just ripping assets and remastering them like what I do, to make actual good source content, you're probably looking at 5 to 10 years. of just training. And that will scare every single one of these cucks away. None of these people actually really want to put in the effort to do something. As a hang on a second.
Oh shit.
As a comparison, let's look at a World of Warcraft port. So Warcraft 3 has lots of people who port assets for it. I port assets for it, and StarCraft 2, again, you know, Blizzard prominently featured for both games people who ported assets for those games from World of Warcraft. To port an asset from World of Warcraft to Warcraft 3, you have a checklist of things you need to do. First, you need to cull all the animations and the animation data you don't want. Now, why is that? Because it's a useless waste of file size. The second is you may want to reduce some of the texture resolution depending on how big your unit is in the game. The third thing is you need to set up your hit test collision. What your hit test collision is for clicking. If you don't have that configured, you can't click on the unit very well. That's why you might see in some maps they have they just attach a unit or something to another unit or whatever, and that unit functions as a hit test. That should be unnecessary, and it's wasteful because now you have 2 units worth of actors in the scene. That's very wasteful. It's also very lazy. That's a Blizzard solution. You don't want to do that. You want to have your hit test actually configured on the mesh itself. Any other solution is inexcusable.
Well, Arcane doesn't even do that. They just have units with no hit test, so you have to group select them or you can't select them at all.
Yeah, so those kinds of people should be banned from the website because they produce low quality content.
What are you talking about? Arcane is featured!
Well, that's depressing. The next things you need to do is stuff like player color and particle effects and stuff like that. So let me tell you a little secret. The vast majority of people out there don't even do the first thing. They don't cull the animations. So a lot of those animations are like situationally useful, and you can construe it as like, oh, I want to have these animations available in case a developer downloads my model and has a use for it. But if you are releasing an asset, it is your job to release it in a state where the developer is able to use it through the editor without having to go through a modeling tool to fix it, to finish it. Otherwise, you don't deserve to be posting your content anywhere. Otherwise, you just plainly haven't done your fucking job. But almost all these animations are just labeled the stock, like, cinematic XXX numbers from the exporter and are not labeled in a manner that the editor can read it. The editor can only read animations with a certain name. So they couldn't even be bothered to name the animations in a way in which a mapper can actually access them through the world editor. So that is 99.99% of ports on the internet. You'll find that most people have blindly ported it and not configured a single fucking thing. There's no collision, there's no textures, there's no particles, nothing like that. So they're actually unusable. So basically what you've got to do is now you've got to go into Magos or MDL Viz or preferably 3ds Max and actually do their fucking job for them. Because all they've done is use like a straight exporter out of the WoW model viewer and called it a day. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are adverse to ports, is because people do such a fucking job with ports that they're basically unusable as they are. But then again, that's 99% of the custom models and kit bashes on Hive Workshop anyways. They just look worse. You know, at least with a blatant copy-pasted port, you don't have to extract the assets yourself. You can finish the job. It's a hell of a lot easier than trying to unfuck something that was just like garbage assets from the very beginning. So let's go into StarCraft 2 for a second. Now, on top of all of that, because you do have to do all of that still, which is much more difficult in StarCraft 2 because you don't have third-party editors to do it. You have to do it in 3ds Max or the XML editor. You also have to create normal maps for them. Guess who makes normal maps for their ports? Not Blizzard, because their Warcraft 3 assets don't have them. And nobody who brings World of Warcraft stuff into StarCraft 2. There's not a single fucking person I've ever seen who actually goes through the fucking effort to port their stuff correctly. They still lack hit test. They still aren't configured animation-wise. They still don't have particle effects. They still don't have team color. And most importantly, they still don't have normal maps. Now, you might think because I talked about baking high poly and low poly that normal maps are some arcane thing to make. Well, actually, it turns out there's a really easy way to make normal maps for stuff that already has a diffuse that you're porting from something. And if you don't want absolute picture perfect perfection, you can actually generate normal maps from diffuse maps. There's Photoshop plugins to do so, and there's a like a $10-15 program on Steam called Mindtex. And I know I mentioned Mindtex in the past on this podcast. I'll mention it again because it is a very simple, cheap program. It's one of the few programs that I would say is worth its money because it does its job very, very well. It creates these maps from diffuses, and they turn out really, 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 really well. And it is literally like a few clicks and you're done. And you just throw it into 3ds Max and you export and you're fucking done. Like, it takes 15 minutes to do a Lineage 2 port or a World of Warcraft port to StarCraft 2 with collision, particle effects, and normal maps. Making proper player color is a little bit more difficult because I'm not an artist, but it's not really that much more difficult. Emissive maps and stuff like that, specular, that's all really, really easy to do in StarCraft 2. Nobody actually has any excuse for not doing this, but they're so fucking lazy, they don't even want to learn how easy it is to do it. Most people don't even use 3ds Max to port World of Warcraft stuff to StarCraft 2 to begin with. So it's no fucking surprise it turns out like garbage. So the thing is that when you hand people more power to make their projects, which Warcraft Reforged may or may not do, it's not going to change the end results. If anything, the results you're going to get are going to be even more depressing and even more embarrassing because it's going to be the same lazy shit you see today when you could do even more. It's just going to create a gap that just increases larger and larger and larger, like Goatsee's asshole, between what you get and what you're expected to get.
Well, it goes back to the idea that as you progress in a field, products that come after other products should learn from their predecessors, their ancestors, and instead they get worse. So it's actually not a surprise that you just have this shit happen all over the place, especially in communities that are designed around Blizzard games. So here we have a model.
That's from Lineage 2. That's from Unreal Warfare engine. That took 15 minutes to port. All animations, custom normals. I did texture edits on it. That is from a game that I think is around the age of Warcraft 3. Maybe even older. It is not hard to do this shit. It is so fucking easy, I can do it. And I'm Canadian. The only reason why other people can't do this is because they're lazy. That is the only reason. It is not difficult. It is not difficult by any stretch of the imagination. But nobody does it because they're lazy. Plain and simple.
It looks very fancy. The whole stream can see. We have the technology, boys.
I have others, but I gotta find them. It's fucking all this shit. It's difficult to find on these hard drives. There's just so much shit in here. Fucking custom creep and stuff that all got lost when 1.5 decided to delete my files.
Yes, that is another Blizzard classic. Hey, if you guys are anticipating Reforged anytime soon, make sure to back up your fucking folders.
Yep, because Ricky lost a lot of shit too when that latest Warcraft 3 update came out.
Oh, wait, did it actually happen in Warcraft 3?
Yeah,
Oh.
A lot of stuff were lost.
Oh, okay. I thought that was actually a thing of the past. I was almost saying that sarcastically.
Because Warcraft 3 pushed a lot of stuff into your My Documents. And
right, yeah.
It fucked a lot of stuff out. So this is from Terra. The model and everything like that are completely custom. The arrow model, that is. That was something I'd never done before. Since the mesh didn't normally have an arrow associated, I wanted to create something that only appeared during the attack animations, so that the unit would basically draw an energy arrow and then fire that energy arrow, and then I would use that arrow for the projectile and stuff like that. So I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn how to make it animate the texture, how to make it appear and disappear for the specific animations and keyframe it. I think it took me about an hour.
Including the learning process, or was that
Yeah,
not part of it?
that's including the learning process.
Oh, okay. And so what's their excuse then?
They're lazy as fuck. So I've actually noticed that not just with StarCraft, but also League of Legends, where Riot would claim that particle effects are hard to create, and they're not. Particle effects are actually really, really easy. Because you might think that a particle effect requires some fucking complicated math or some other shit to slap together, but it doesn't. It just requires textures. It just requires a core understanding of how stuff looks like in real life and then replicating that with the textures. And as it turns out, there are tools out there that you can very easily get called FumeFX that will create fire and smoke and other sort of complicated systems for you very, very, very easily. And while it's true that FumeFX can be computationally expensive, consider that I was generating my FumeFX scenes using an i7-920 on stock, and it took maybe an hour for the absolute most complicated ones. And in StarCraft, you can have particle systems as simple as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 particles. That is a fully featured explosion with sparks and everything in it, just by using animated textures that are already in the game, freely available off of the internet, or something you generated out of FumeFX, or a mix of them. Particle effects are actually really, 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 really simple. And when you get into particle effects, you're going to realize that Blizzard doesn't understand how particles work. Like, Warcraft 3's particles are actually really good for their time, but StarCraft 2's are a massive disaster, and it's really easy to do better than them. Because you will learn that less is more, and subtleness is much more important than just spamming crap. And once you just understand the core tenets, you basically can make 99% of the particle systems you want to make. And you can do that pretty easily. Basically, generating the textures is harder than making the actual particle systems. But the vast majority of people don't want to do that. What you actually have in Warcraft 3 is a lot of people who are too scared to get into 3ds Max will actually just replace textures in existing particle effects and call them new. And
yeah, well, that replaces them across the entire game as well, so you'll see a lot of that shit. The fact that there's even a skins category where the required steps are to replace existing textures so that all existing assets can no longer be used seems really psychotic to me in an engine where you don't have a reasonably easy to reach upper limit for number of entities, like number of custom assets or
all you need
units
to
or
do is
whatever.
just change the fucking textures in an MDL, man. It's not hard.
Yeah.
You can do that with Magos.
Well, shall we reach the Q&A portion of the stream, since we have some questions in the chat?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
All right. Imperator asks, what's the benefit of moving stuff to documents instead of having all in one place? All in one place.
There isn't any. So you may have noticed that
Remastered did
there
this
is
too,
a
by the way.
great inconsistency between where games actually decide to store their files. There is actually another folder, and I didn't even know this folder even existed until I went on to Windows 10, and I had to try to port some stuff.
It's an app data.
I'm gonna try to find it here. It's
Then there's the games that install directly to your C directory instead of in program files for some reason.
So there is actually a saved games folder in your user directory.
Yep.
Of Windows.
Yeah, that's.
I didn't even know that existed, but that is where Warcraft 3 put some of its files.
Yep. I had to go find those for when I was modifying I was trying to find a specific save for a campaign and carry it over from one hard drive to another because it wasn't showing up when I was in the middle of rebuilding my computer in the middle of a campaign playthrough, and I had no idea where the fuck it was, and I found that in some obscure Q&A section of some forum. Somebody was asking for the same sort of thing.
It's also worth mentioning here, since I went through a lot of annoying shit with this myself, is Warcraft 3, like other previous Blizzard games, used to store its CD keys in its MPQs. But with the latest versions, Since they're updates, they're actually stored in the Program Data Blizzard Entertainment Warcraft III folder. You'll see some W3K files in there. I didn't know where my CDs were, and I hadn't linked the keys to I hadn't linked the Reign of Chaos key to my Battle.net account for some reason. So I need to reclaim those, and it took me quite a while to find those. So if you ever need your CD keys, that's where they're stored.
Why does it store them in plain text?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
Why
Why
did NCIX store all of our private information, credit cards, and other stuff in plain text? I'll never understand why companies do quote-unquote security the way they do when they're well enough educated to know better.
Speaking of education, Veek7 asks, why do you think Unity is unusable?
Because it's Unity. Between the DRM and the restricted nature, the shitty performance, the subpar middleware, and everything else associated with it, Unity is a cesspool.
And what are the advantages of Unreal in that department? Like, if everything you just described, like, how does Unreal 4 do it better in this case?
Well, for example, for Unreal 4, you don't need a license to do shit like mess around with shaders. You also have full source code access. That also doesn't require a license. So one of the stigmas involving Unreal is that back in Unreal 3, the licensing was kind of a mess. It was less of a mess for the UDK, but it was still kind of a mess. Especially if you ever wanted something like source code access, I believe you needed a commercial license for that. But for Unreal 4, that is all completely different. You have access to every single thing, and the systems and stuff are a lot better. The other thing about Unity is the people who make marketplace content for Unity are scumbags. And a lot of that has been actually ported to Unreal, but they didn't bother to configure it for Unreal. So there is a lot of shit in the marketplace that is actually not using correct collision data or anything like that, that has been straight ported from Unity. Unity, the DRM for Unity is really quite something special, in which I believe that even when you uninstall Unity and stuff like that, it will still persist in your system. The very fact that it's installing DRM to begin with is really, 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 really concerning. DRM is definitely something you should never have within software. It is universally destructive, it's bloat, and it doesn't do its job. If I want to pirate Unity or pirate something from Unity, I can do so freely. DRM isn't going to stop you. The other thing about Unity is that Unity is using C#, and it is possible to freely decompile C# down to its source, which means that I can take all these mobile games, as I have been, to acquire assets for my Dungeons and Dragons games. I can just push 2 buttons and I can have literally every single thing out of the game. So if you were concerned about having people pirating assets out of your game and stealing them for whatever reason, you would also not use Unity, because C# is also not performant and not secure at all. You do not want to be using C# in any environment that involves performance. C#, like Java, is not performance or security conscious. That isn't to say you can't use it for things. It's great for making small tools and stuff like that where performance and security really isn't a concern. But to use it in a game environment is unthinkable. And that's precisely what they do.
If you were making a game in a 2D engine, or if you were trying to make a 2D engine for a game more accurately, what would you use in that case?
I would use Unreal 4. I don't have much experience with 2D in Unreal 4, but right now what we're actually doing is we are making a replacement. And by we, I mostly mean HKS. I mostly just test it for him. He is making a replacement for Roll20. So this is definitely different than the subject you're talking about, since you're more than likely talking about an RTS. But
Yes.
it does support 2D. There is nothing stopping you from using 2D. There is orthographic cameras if you wish to use them. They do have the paper 2D system in it. I cannot tell you how well it performs, but it is supposed to perform quite well, and people have made sprite-based games with it. I believe that Guilty Gear, one of the new Guilty Gear games, is using Unreal 4. That is an anime fighter, so that could give you an idea of how a 2D game done within that engine can look. It's an anime game, so maybe if anime is not your thing, you'll mostly look at it from a technical perspective. But these developers, I believe, previously used a proprietary engine as opposed to Unreal 4, and then ended up switching to Unreal 4 to make a 2D fighter in it. So it has to perform well for Arc Systems to do that. And I think actually Dragon Ball Fighter Z might also be made with an Unreal 4 as well. So as far as like the control mechanisms and the appearance and stuff like that, if it can work for fast-paced anime fighters, it most certainly can work for an RTS. The bigger issue you're probably going to encounter with an RTS and Unreal 4 right now is there's not really a huge amount of source material for projects to deconstruct if you really want to get into. But this is going to be an issue you're going to encounter everywhere anyways, because the RTS genre is very, very dead. There's not really a lot of things to look at for that. So hopefully, you already come into it with some of the skills necessary to know what you want to do with it. But it certainly is going to be a climb upwards no matter where you go. I would definitely say give Unreal 4 a chance and look into Paper 2D, because it has certainly worked for the anime fighters and stuff like that. I don't see any reason why it couldn't work for a RTS. And since you do have source code, if you have the skills that you're probably going to need to make an RTS anyways, you can make any changes you actually really needed to make.
Okay, cool. Luciferius asks, are you gay?
I am Canadian. I have to be gay by design.
And that should end it, unless anybody else has any final questions. And I guess while we're waiting on any of those to roll in, if you have any final thoughts to wrap this one up.
Warcraft 3 probably took like 37 years off of my life.
Jay Wilson.
It is so unfathomably bad. I mean, okay, Reign of Chaos is just like a really, really shitty campaign. Like, I could see Reign of Chaos being something you download off a Hive Workshop, but Frothing Throne is really, really something else in how it's just designed to be as fucking malicious as possible.
Oh yeah, ETA on that run. How far in are
you? Right now I'm in the Blood Elf campaign towards the end of it.
Oh, okay. You got a ways to go. You got a lot to see.
I still gotta do the Undead campaign, and I don't think I'm gonna touch the Orc one. People have asked me to touch it, but
you're not going to play the point-and-click adventure, dude.
I have an aversion to that. It smells like cooties. I don't want to get cooties, and I think I'll get cooties if I touch that.
I did tell you how there was a part where I would literally got up from my chair in the middle of one of those fights and went to take a piss and came back like 3 minutes later, and I had made progress. My heroes had moved off the screen.
Yeah.
So
this is not going to be a short run. There is definitely a lot of times I've had to restart missions, especially in Frothing Throne. There's an entire segment dedicated to the final mission for Reign of Chaos.
Yes.
And while I do plan to give the final mission for Frothing Throne a few legitimate attempts just to show how the gameplay actually is, I'm actually walking into that one with a strategy to cheese it, and I plan to cheese the fuck out of that one. And it's probably going to take a really long time, but I'm going to cheese it to go through it, because I think actually legitimately beating that mission may not actually be possible for me to do. So
yeah.
I hope you guys like exploiting busted AI, because that is...
Well, half the time the AI just exploits itself onto you, though. like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's pretty fucked up.
Warcraft 3 is it's quite the game. Like, I knew it was bad, but you don't really get a feel for how bad the campaign is until you actually go through it on hard, because in one of those Maiev missions, you have Naga attacking you and you keep getting transmissions from a Myrmidon that doesn't exist. And I thought it was because I'd accidentally played on normal. I was like, oh shit, I'm on normal difficulty. This is obviously a bug because a Myrmidon's supposed to spawn on hard difficulty. I restarted the mission on hard difficulty, and the Myrmidon still was not there.
Oh shit. Yeah, that's
he never actually existed. So
that's pretty amazing.
Like there's nothing done in that campaign done right.
Well, I for one look forward to it. And yeah, it's cool. If you didn't find those art tools, by the way, I can post them because I still have them.
Oh, feel free to do so. I was looking, but then I got caught up looking for those images.
Yeah,
I don't know where my Skype folder is. I can dig them out of my Warcraft directory, but the ones you have may actually be... Oh no, I posted them before, and then I think you grabbed them.
Yeah, that's when I grabbed them.
But yeah, it goes without saying, but I haven't actually really looked into those that much. It was just because I forget the specific reason why, but there was some models we had difficulties with in StarCraft, and we ended up getting those tools to try to use them with, but it turned out we didn't need them. So I also don't actually know how the physics system or anything like that actually work, but they are in there. So when I go back to StarCraft 2, I will probably attempt to figure out how those work, because doing physics dresses and stuff through nodes like Delphinium detailed is much harder than it looks. Because it turns out if I had 2 chains of nodes, the entire scene would actually go into the nth dimension, and shit would just fly all over the place for no apparent, no discernible reason whatsoever.
That's why
So,
you need 3 chains.
yeah, there was a dress I was trying to rig like the one that he had, but it was it was not possible. And then I tried to bake PhysX animations, and that I learned that PhysX is terrible too, because PhysX requires you to have pre-existing animations,
Oh, okay.
defeating the entire purpose of having a physics engine. That's also actually one of the major things about Unreal 4 right now. If you are thinking about getting into Unreal 4 and you're concerned about physics because they're using PhysX, they are actually building their own physics engine now. So they did demo it. It was hilariously buggy in their demo, but they are working on a replacement, which is saying a lot, because most people are content just to use physics and deal with the fact that it's so bad and broken. Every game that uses physics is fucked. Like, physics is even worse than Havoc. Take PlanetSide 2, for example. If you get a tank stuck in the valley, there is a probability that your tank is actually just going to enter the atmosphere.
That's my shit, man.
Like, it will just gain velocity for no apparent reason. And the controls and stuff in all those games are really bad. If you've ever wondered why a lot of games seem to have really, really bad vehicle controls, it's probably because of physics. So they're working on a replacement for that, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. In
Cool.
some months, I would actually like to talk more about that D&D client that HKS is making. I'll actually probably make a video about that, because it is shaping up. Most people here, I don't think, probably even know what I'm even talking about when I talk about D&D clients, but it is a pretty big deal, because the digital, if you are running like digital tabletop stuff, you're typically stuck with Roll20, which is a web page,
Yeah.
and it performs really badly, and it hasn't seen any real development attention put into it since it was made. It was a scam starter project from Redditors, so that just like that kind of like says everything you need to know about it. And we are really fed up with it. So HKS is taking it upon himself to actually make a complete replacement for it in Unreal 4. Which at this point in time, I can tell you, it is actually functionally comparable to Roll20 at this point. Like, he has already, and he did have some previous experience, but he's not like coming into this with like pro cramming experience. A lot of this stuff he's learning as he's going, and within a couple months, he's actually made something that's functionally competitive with Roll20. It's just some super major features at the moment, namely the account system, are not fully complete yet. So I will probably make a video about that in the future when there's a little bit more to show in that regard. But it is actually something that's really interesting to me, because switching from like modding and mapping and stuff like that, and going into this into D&D and making a D&D game. I've been running a campaign online for about close to 2 years now. And then actually like having someone building an actual client for it as well. That's really something I could get into a really long talk about. There is actually an article I'm going to be posting really soon. It's just a short summary kind of thing. But there's a much larger one that I've been working on that probably won't even be finished this year, just because of all the other time commitments I've got. But it's a really long-winded process. But like, going from mods to D&D has been actually a really educational experience. I've learned a lot about the designing of interactions between like players and stuff, because while you're DMing a D&D game, it's obviously like a real-time thing, and you have to do a lot of improvising. So what you're actually typically doing off game is you're building like a tool set for yourself. You know, you're getting your maps, you're getting your sound effects, you're getting your music, you're getting your stat blocks and all your information together that you may not even use, because it really ultimately depends on like what the players decide to do. And it is very, very different from like making a campaign for like a year or two or three or however long, where you're putting all your stuff together and testing it and maybe having a few people help you. But at the large, it's like a very centralized, focused, singular, linear push, where your checklist is like, okay, I gotta make a map, I gotta make the units, I gotta make the AI, I gotta make the gameplay and everything function, and then I'm done. Since this is something that's constantly learning and evolving and growing, and there's so many different faces to it that change every single time you get into it, it is a really complicated equation. And since it's also like a very personal thing as well, you're not making it for like this nondescript group of individuals that you're releasing to mostly out of the goodness of your heart. It's not like a selfish project that you make for yourself and then publish if you publish it or whatever. It's something that you're making basically for people, for a very static group of people, typically speaking. So, and the thing is that you can't really talk to them though. Like you can't really say, "Hey, I'm working on this and I'm working on that," because discovery is a part of it, right? Like you can't spoil stuff.
Right.
So it gets to be really, really complicated where you're trying to like read what people are doing and thinking and what they're going to do and think without actually like directly communicating what you're going to do yourself. So it gets to be it is very different. And I take that and I'm looking at like my StarCraft 2 project that I'm going to attempt in particular because I know it's going to be very difficult to actually get it functional, just like Warcraft 3 was. Warcraft 3 is a wake up call on how bad this actually can get really quickly. But at least StarCraft 2 wasn't freezing for me in like 3 minutes of the map. But it was educational in a sense that like I could look at it and be like, I have a better idea of what players will actually try to do in the map. Um, which means that I can kind of like structure the AI and the objectives. And like it's hard for me to really put into words, but in D&D, you can't always be so sure what the players are going to do because your rules are not really that restricted. Like the rules in D&D are basically just like a way of granulating actions that you can attempt to make. The rules can't cover everything. So people might do some really strange stuff. And a part of your responsibility as the DM is to have the world be capable of handling any of that strange stuff. Maybe you're using a pre-built adventure. In my case, I made something from scratch. I haven't referenced first-party or third-party source material basically since I began. And since I have all the answers in my head of what can happen in the world if a person does X or Y or Z, I kind of like build myself a palette of tools that says, I can be prepared to deal with if a player goes here or if a player does this or this interaction happens. So typically what happens when you're planning out your sessions, because you can only do so much work to prepare, is, well, the players are going to go to this map and they're probably going to encounter this character and fight these fights or something like that. But if you've built it in such a way where it's not like a linear corridor shooter, you really can't always predict what exactly the players are going to do. And typically what you're actually going to find is most players will usually stick by the books. Like they'll do stuff pretty predictably, but there's always these decisions and these sort of circumstantial events that happen that are very, 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 very strange. And that's something that I would like for you to be able to explore in a more traditional digital game like StarCraft 2 is like that's always why I've tried to make like build and destroy, because like the point and click adventures and stuff like that, like even if you make them really well, they're still really static, right? Like there's only really one way you can experience them, and that's just the right way. Like it's like basically it's literally just a quick time event. And what D&D showed me is how much potential there actually is for exploring something built in sort of a dynamic setting. It's basically like taking all the restrictions off, going full Super Saiyan 4. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Like it's really just like in the limits of your ability to really describe what's happening. So you can't do that in these typical campaigns. Like in Warcraft 3 and the build and destroy maps, there's always some fucking time limit or some bullshit gimmick. And it always is something there just to distract you from the build and destroy because they couldn't make a fucking AI for that game. The AI is handed so many fucking crutches. Its buildings give it 90 fucking food. It has infinite money all the fucking time. In a lot of cases, it has increased build speeds or revives heroes nearly instantly. Or you have the bullshit like the Final Reign of Chaos map, where it's just like, oh, here, have infinite fucking Infernals that are immune to spells. Blizzard didn't like their own fucking spell system, so they just made shit opt out of it. Like, they just completely concede that they don't want you to play an RTS. But you are playing an RTS. It's an RTS framework. It's top down. You're controlling units through an interface. You're harvesting resources. But at every opportunity, they pull you away from that, put you on rails, and say, no, you only do this. Whereas D&D is literally like, by design, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. Like, the more you push towards putting things on rails, the worse it gets. They're completely polarized. And the experience taught me, what you can do if you just open your eyes and try to make something more dynamic and make something more about what I was actually engineered to do, which is empowering decision making. This is what I really want to try to explore with StarCraft 2 when I get into it, is just, really doubling down on making the AI function and making the maps open and explorable with lots of bases and macro gameplay and just the stuff the fucking game is made for you to do that the official campaigns are too scared to get into.
Yeah, well, I think it speaks a lot to the idea that AI drives a lot of your engagement from a player's perspective. What they're actually engaging with is the enemy. I mean, that's the same thing that they're engaging with when they play Melee. Especially in a game like StarCraft 1, where you have so many examples of just such a rich competitive history between the top level players, the bourgeois, these people who have dominated for years, top of their craft, constantly competing. It was culturally significant to them, and they were fully engaged at every step of the way as they were ascending to this like relative godhood amongst the rest of their peers as competitive players. And they're fully engaged, they're fully driven, and they're expressing their own playstyles. But you can make something that's, in theory, and at least, even more open to expression on the player's side than that in Brood War, because you can make it so that the tech trees are less limiting to specific styles. You can make it so that you have your own set of world building elements and your own set of personality to the individual races and the individual units of each race, and make it so that different combinations and compositions give completely different strategies merit that otherwise don't exist in the base game. Even with relatively small balance tweaks, you can accomplish stuff like this. You don't even have to necessarily add in a bunch of new units. But if you do decide to go down that route, then you're going to be that further along the path of developing something that is truly immersive in that sense. Like, what I really don't get is a lot of the cinematic games, quote unquote, that try to drive immersion by stuff that is obviously completely distracting at the end of the day. You don't get anything out of that. You don't actually engage with the game. Immersion to me is when I am fully engaged. It's not when I'm thinking of every enemy as a living entity. It's when I'm thinking, thoughts do go through my head that, oh, I can't believe my unit died there. And that's not losing immersion. That's actually driving more value if that was a significant event. And so it's like the opposite of what people think. Like, people think you're immersed if you think every Marine has a backstory and you care about them. It's the opposite, really, in many ways. You're more immersed if you're thinking of your units as your assets and your enemies' units as their assets, and trying to figure out a way to engage with them the same way that you are engaging with your army, and the same way that you would engage with another human player. Not necessarily that your enemies have to be human-like or have to have their own sets of melee-style strategies, but I think you can learn a lot just from looking at Melee, and that's what I've been able to do as well. I'm going to make a video on that myself at some point, probably when I'm less sick.
Immersion by design is engagement. You can't have immersion without engagement.
Yeah.
And just presenting people a fucking backstory and saying, here's your immersion, that doesn't work. It never can work. By design, it doesn't work. Like, D&D is about immersion. That's what the whole thing, that's what the whole core philosophy is about. And all the rules and the stats and stuff like that are just ways of kind of like cementing down the game world so that you can have interactions that aren't just arbitrary decisions. So, like, by design, though, it's about role-playing. And role-playing is about immersion. Like, you are playing a character. You are in that character's shoes. You are the one fighting the goblins through that character, so on and so forth. Like, by design at strengths, it's about immersion through engagement. That's the entire concept.
Well, it's the same sort of thing when you roleplay as a commander in an RTS or something.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It's literally exactly the same thing. And, like, even, like I mentioned this, I believe, last time, or maybe when I was talking to Bellatel or something like that, But the very concept of like health and stuff is totally different. Like it's treated from a very different way. Where health is not just some arbitrary number you just whack at things. It's supposed to be like a representation of like experience and stuff. Like the very approach to all the different concepts is different, which is why even in like Pathfinder, where a lot of numbers get really insane, the fights still tend to be fairly short, like in comparison. I remember when I started D&D, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I don't like combat in D&D," and I never really understood that. But then I learned about the games that they had played, where it was literally just like enemies are just a stat block and they just auto attack you and that's it. Like it's just people just roll dice and then that's it. There's no actual engagement. I was like, oh, well now I understand why they don't like combat in D&D. It's because they're playing Warcraft 3. So
Yeah.
it just takes even longer. Like that's literally what it is, because that's what Warcraft 3 is. So, you know, the tech tree and stuff like that, that's why I focus so much on the unit behaviors and how their weapons behave and how they control and stuff like that. Because I want that to be about what defines them, not some button you push that just nukes everything or debuffs everything or some other shit. Like that's just not interesting. And I was actually, I know that yesterday morning when I was doing that stupid Blood Elf / Nega prison mission with the fucking jailer that has like 6,000 health and spell immunity, I actually died at the very end of that and I got very angry. And then I started drinking all this coffee and snorting all this cocaine, and I ended up finishing it when I was really tired. And I went on this really long rant about how, you know, it's not that I don't like micro, because I played League of Legends, I played Blizzard Dota, and I played micro intensive heroes. I played Ari, I played Li Ming, I played all this shit. But the thing is that it's the engagement that's completely different. Because in all these other Blizzard maps and shit like that, you're just pointing units in one direction, pushing a button, and then waiting. And your ability usage is restricted to pushing a button, clicking on a unit, and that's it. Like there isn't engagement. It's just a quick time event. Where at least with these other heroes in these other games, since everything is usually based on skill shots and hitting moving targets and stuff like that, you have engagement in the sense that you have to pay attention to the velocities everything is at. You have to predict where everything is going, because I play exclusively with Quickcast, and you have to understand all these mechanics and had to have practiced them a lot to really get the most out of them. And you get more out of being more accurate. So there's much greater of a skill ceiling than just pointing a thing at something and it being done. And it's also much faster. So it's not that it doesn't work. You know, it's not that the idea has absolutely no merit. It's all about the intent behind the execution. And the micro, I don't even really call them micro maps in Warcraft 3, because they're not. They're literally point and click adventures. That's literally what they are, because the APM, the maximum APM you can get to go through those maps is like fucking 10. They're like, most of the time, all of your APM in Warcraft 3 goes to fighting the fucking pathing and the unit AI, because it's so bad. And all that shit is only bad because Blizzard wanted to remove player skill expression. Blizzard didn't want the game to be about players microing. So it's really weird that we go into maps that take out all of the game's meat, all of the fucking actual gameplay, which is the RTS aspect, hand you maybe a dozen units tops, and tell you to go through a hour-long mission with those units that literally amounts to just walking from point A to point B, auto-attacking shit with thousands to tens of thousands of fucking health. Like the last few fights in that one mission alone, I think it amounts to like 15,000 health of units or more. I think it's probably more like 20 or 30,000. Like that is insane, given that you just don't put out hardly any fucking damage in that game. And nothing does anything. Like, take the Knight, for example. The Knight is just a wall of health and an auto attack. The Golem boss is just a wall of health and an auto attack, and then Shockwave he uses when he has mana. That Enforcer with 6,000 health and spell immunity, he has Chain Lightning, and that's it. You can't even fucking manage him because he's spell immune. And it's so boring. You don't do it. You're not doing anything. You're just getting hit by damage and just auto-attacking shit to death. Like, who the fuck makes this shit? People who don't fucking play games. People who don't fucking care. People are like, I want you to take this much fucking time to go through your map. And I mean, I look at my RTS maps and I say, I want to create long maps. But then I look at it and I say, how do I make that game length actually enjoyable? That's by having a large, in-depth tech tree, a lot of terrain, an opponent that changes over time, like the kind of like basic shit. Because I'm modeling off of professional games, just like the Brood War games. I'm modeling off of those Warlords and Merchants games, where you're like fighting tooth and nail for like 2 or 3 hours across this huge map against multiple opponents. Like I'm looking at it from the perspective of I want to create a grand strategy that's real time. But none of these people look at this shit like that. They're looking at like, how can I make something that deceives you as much as possible and consumes as much time as possible? These fucking maps where it's just shit just standing around doing nothing, waiting for you to come up and kill them. This is a jailbreak map. You're fighting through a fucking huge prison filled with enemies. Why is nothing happening ever? You have all these exotic units, these Naga and these Blood Elves, that do nothing. So why do you put the player in a situation where you are doing nothing? Why not at least give the player, something to do through fucking macro maps? Or at least you have resources and shit to deal with. Blizzard just never fucking does that. It's always got to be some bullshit. And then any time where it does come to you fighting an AI enemy in a build and destroy situation, they're too fucking lazy to make the AI actually function. They have to give them all those crutches instead. So it becomes unfair as fuck. And then what ends up happening is you start dreading the build and destroy maps more than the RPG maps. And then you have truly descended into the goat's anus.
Oh yeah, that definitely happens to me every single time I've played any of these custom campaigns as well, because they do the same thing but usually even worse somehow. So I can sympathize with that. Speaking of Warlords and Merchants, is that shit functional right now?
I have no idea. I haven't played that in years. I think Ricky's new gaggle of faggots that he's accrued through his YouTube channel prefer to play Mafia or something.
Oh shit. Well, if it is functional, I would love to host some game nights at some point. So maybe I'll look into that, because that was actually a pretty fun experience when you were surrounded by other homosexuals. We do have one last question for you, as Paulo Mera asks. I probably mispronounced his name. So what's the average time you spent on the main campaign's macro maps? 90 minutes? Question mark?
It depends. Some of them I'm able to close really quickly, but most of them I can't. What I've learned in Warcraft 3 is that you can't do early aggression. It does not work because of all the pre-placed units, the upgrades, and the infinite money. So 90 minutes is not an exaggeration. I would say it's probably closer to 60 minutes. That's a number I see a lot that I remember seeing, but a lot of them are probably more. Because you really have to play like a bitch in those. Like, it really comes down to you turtling, getting money, and then making one decisive strike. What ends up happening is that even if I end up in an advantageous situation, it's more difficult to close the maps. The one map that I was able to take complete control of very quickly, but it still took a long time to clear, was the map I finished last morning, which was the gates in Outlands, where you have both the Blood Elves and the Naga. I knew that the Naga units were incredibly overpowered, but since I had remembered mostly castle fight stats and not campaign stats, I had not realized just how overpowered the flying penises actually are.
Yes.
So I started spamming flying penises and towers, and it turns out that the flying penises were able to eradicate all the orc bases without any issues whatsoever. But it still ended up taking a long time. I think that map was closer to 90 minutes, yeah. Because I cleared every single thing on the map.
Yeah.
I know that it is possible to drain all the resources out of the build and destroy opponents, but it usually takes multiple hours to do so. I think the final Frothing Throne mission, it is possible to drain them of resources, but it takes about 4 hours.
Oh, well, if you really want to know anything about that mission, you know how, I'm assuming since you played it before, Illidan has quote-unquote expansions in that map?
Yeah.
Those are all other players colored the same as him. The town gets moved to the coordinate in the order that he goes to, which is weird, and that's done through a trigger. He doesn't share resources with him. There's a comment in his main AI script that says, this base is not to be attacked, so it has uber defense.
Yep. That's actually a big constant
Yeah.
in this game. Actually, Blizzard doesn't like you doing things like
No.
clearing the map. They
Just
don't
that,
like you
but
actually doing that
the
stuff.
mindset that it takes to write that comment in there and not fire yourself with a shotgun is so
Yeah.
insane to me, though. Like, I don't understand how anybody can write that as a developer of a quote unquote RTS title. This base is not to be attacked. Like, who the fuck do you even think you are? Are you designing an elaborate QuickTime event? Can you I guess that's the closest thing they have to any honesty in the entire
Do you
development
guys want to
team.
know how to cheese that map?
Let's hear it.
You put shades on the points. Because you see, normally what I've noticed is that, at least in the final Reign of Chaos mission, it seems that the heroes have true side gems. But Illidan in Frothing Throne, his inventory is actually full of items that summon units. So he cannot see the shades. And you can actually trap his hero with 4 shades, or you can place them on the control points, and he will just completely shut down, and then you are free to actually clear the map at that point.
Wow.
And you can try to set up depleting his main base of resource, but I believe that he builds things in an extremely high speed and maybe multiples at a time. And of course, he has a lot of money, and yeah, there is multiple players, so it takes a very long time to do so, but it is actually possible. I don't plan to actually clear the map, but I'm going to kill most of the opponents on it, and you know, show how fucked up the map really is.
It should be
But
relatively easy to clear out Vosh and Kale's bases and that.
yeah, they're not really that heavily defended, but yeah, his main base is absolutely insane. But like, that is a theme with a lot of this expansion, especially, is that they just didn't want you attacking a lot of this stuff. Like, let's take, for example, the final Reign of Chaos mission. So I really struggled with that map a lot. I don't know if it was just like a combination of bad luck and, the fact that I was playing really badly or whatever, but I would always lose to the Infernal attack around 5 minutes. I just could not put out the damage to kill the Infernals. Even if I broke their pathing and they were running around, I just didn't have the damage to actually kill them because everything was either dead or perma-crippled. So I ended up cheesing that map. Now, to cheese that map, what you need to do is you need to get a bunch of Hippogriff Riders. You need to put them behind Jaina's gold mine. And then when Jaina loses and the undead start building there, your goal is to actually kill the Acolytes. But they're actually invulnerable when they spawn. But the invulnerability only lasts until they're close to finishing their build list. Now, if you manage to kill them before they finish their build list, you have about 5 minutes or a little less to come back, because Archimonde's going to be throwing rocks at you that perma-stun this entire fucking time. It's actually really annoying to execute because they do splash damage, so you've actually got to... I had to reduce the game speed to slowest because I could not click on the Acolytes behind Archimonde's thick, dummy ass. And... but once I killed the Acolytes, I had to run away with the Hippogriff Riders I'd left and make more, and then come back and kill his Necropolis. Because when you kill all of his Acolytes that he spawns with, his AI will actually just flat out fucking shut down.
Oh, okay.
As so long as they didn't build the last building, which I think is the Ziggurat or something like that.
Yeah, because they're constantly requesting it before they progress in the next thread.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's their state machine.
That's the state machine at work. But the AI will actually reactivate at a point, and he'll start building Acolytes again. So there's a good chance you're going to actually run into him building Acolytes while you're destroying the Necropolis. You're going to have to kill an Acolyte every 2 seconds or less, because that's how fast he builds them. And you have to kill them before he builds his buildings.
Wait, what? He actually builds them in 2 seconds?
Yeah, everything builds in ultra fast.
Holy shit.
They just piss out, so you have to be ready to click on them when they pop out so they can't immediately build a structure. And then once you've killed the Necropolis, that's it. You just can sit back and masturbate for 35 minutes.
Wow.
Because he is actually permanently shut down.
Yeah, that's probably how that... I've seen that video where the thumbnail is like, I killed Archimonde or whatever, and I'm assuming
yeah, you
that's how
can kill Archimonde. He has divine armor, but you do 1 damage to him. I actually killed Grom Hellscream in the final Reign of Chaos Orc mission, who has divine armor, because I didn't realize that the item, the soul gem, actually instantly kills him. Like, to me, that was so stupid and unbelievable. I couldn't believe that was how it worked. I thought Thrall just needed to be in the general vicinity when he died, and Blizzard gave him divine armor because they wanted it to be an epic battle, because that's the kind of crap that Blizzard does. So I actually killed him with like 3 wyverns because he doesn't respond to being attacked by air units. I killed him with 3 wyverns over the course of like 5 or 6, 7, 10 minutes, and he just revived. And I was like, okay, so something else is going on here. Maybe I need to use it when he's low. So I brought Thrall up, and then a cinematic fires.
Yeah.
So cinematic fires where Grom's epic voice actor makes epic dialogue, and then I killed him again with wyverns. Or no, I was close to killing him with wyverns, and then nothing was changing, and I realized I had to click the item on him, and it just instantly kills him. And I realized that I had spent probably about like an hour or 2 hours on that map, and just getting fucked by infernals and the chaos orcs with their chaos damage, killing all my buildings, and backdooring me incessantly, getting really, really angry. That was a very frustrating map. And I realized the entire fucking point of the map was never to engage, build, and destroy, or attack him at all. You literally just walk up, click the item on him, and then walk away.
Yep.
And they disabled transports in that map to make it as irritating as possible. But you literally could just, like, hypothetically just suicide through his base and then kill your hero and be done. And
oh yeah, if you kill him, you just revive the hero.
Yeah. Apparently that's possible. I don't think it's supposed to be possible.
No, that sounds like a bug. It sounds like if he dies with the soul gem or whatever, he's supposed to respawn Grom. But
I was told that you can just suicide Thrall and that's it. But like in either event, it's literally like all the orc bases on the map are just there to be ignored. The infernals spawn infinitely without any way for you to stop them, and like that was like one of the real turning points of where I started getting really angry at that game, because it was, you had this ultra powerful campaign only race that of course does chaos damage to everything because they didn't want to use their own fucking damage system anymore. That's what that's all about. That's why you have so much chaos damage in there, is because their AI is too stupid for them to make build and destroy without them ignoring everything and putting you at a huge disadvantage. And then they didn't want you to give transports because they thought you'd be too smart for your own good. And Grom literally does nothing except exist.
Yeah.
Like, Warcraft 3 is like such a cacophony of stupidity.
Did someone say cacophony?
I have a feeling I'm gonna have like a 3-hour review for that fucking game.
I can't wait for it personally.
Because there's like, it's so much to tackle. The fact that like all their names and stuff are ripped off of other franchises. The plot is literally just the Star Wars reboot, or the prequels rather, and it's just so bad. There's just so much faces to the badness. And then there's designer Dave's myriad comments, most of which are just entirely illogical.
Well, look at his
the
head,
fact that he gives like insight into just how delusional Blizzard really is.
Yeah, a big shout out to Imperator for messaging me with that link, man. That was some sick shit. I still can't believe that his fucking the first video I saw of his was like he had his webcam and screen like a quarter of the space that it should have been, with like red text on a red background and completely unreadable.
Yeah, all his videos are so fucked up. This is a guy who's supposed to be a legit game developer, or at least involved in commercial development.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even understand how fucking cropping works.
His fucking thumbnails are in papyrus with no outline against a background that's like insanely noisy, so you can't even read what his fucking thumbnails are. And of course his video titles don't help you out either. Dude. When I found out I had more subs than a Warcraft 3 level designer, for once, the world was correct. Yes, he does make mobile games. That is what he does now.
How many of fucking Blizzard staff have gone on to make either MMO or mobile games? It feels like almost all of them.
It's pretty sick, man. He opens every single live stream with, I don't expect anybody to watch this, but
He's so cocked.
If somebody does, let me know and I'll ask questions. Or no, I don't know what he said. He said, okay, so here's another thing. This is a closing remark about designer Dave being an idiot. He he had something configured incorrectly during one of his most recent Psycho streams, and it kept like shitting the bed during his stream, like turning off. And he's like, well, a lot of people must be streaming to YouTube at once or something. I don't know what's going on. He still can't figure out how to use OBS, man.
Hey, man, for $1,000 a month, you get 24/7 access to his skills, man.
Dude, I still can't believe his Patreon has that option. Just call me up whenever, man.
Dude, if I was a rich fuck I would do it, and I would just phone him at weird hours.
Yeah.
And just ask him like deep philosophical questions, like how do you feel about eggplants?
Well, as long as they're veiny.
So everybody who comes out of Blizzard is either like some hyper liberal reject that goes on to make Guild Wars 2, or some fucking like washed up crack addict like Designer Dave, or some rapid alcoholic like Brevik.
While his
And
wife
that's
plays fucking Path of Exile and nods.
she looks so soulless. She's like, why do I have to deal with this shit? And he's got like that 1,000-yard stare, just fucking rambling on and on and on.
It's not a Blizzard anymore, it's Activision now.
Well, you know,
Oh,
Blizzard,
man.
the real Blizzard developers are Silicon and Synapse. So remember that. That's their original company before they were rebranded and then axed by Vivendi. And Blizzard North is Condor. And Condor was the only real competent lot amongst them. And competent is definitely a very strong word.
Yeah, considering what they went on to make.
Silicon and Synapse couldn't make Win32. And that's why they brought on Condor. It's general running theory.
Well.
And also to try to make 3D. And that turned out real.
Thanks for Warcraft 3, Blizzard.
I often congratulate Activision Blizzard with a series of claps during my run. So look forward to that.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. Let us know when you release it. I'm sure we'll try to do this stuff a bit more regularly. It is pretty fun. Hopefully when I'm not sick and you've got your coffee. And we'll smash some more wave emojis of the African variety, which is all that's being posted in my fucking chat now, so.
Okay, hand. Oh shit, I'm a white supremacist.
Oh! Bye.
Bye.
Bye.